краю нашого волі, я полкового знамена, дивлюсь на нього я востаннє, у незв'ясованій журбі, всю кров мою зі скидання, воно вібрало у собі, всю кров мою зі скидання, у незв'язованій журбі, всю кров мою зі скидання, воно вібрало у собі, всю кров мою зі скидання, воно вібрало у собі.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар, Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великой страны.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні. У нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
О, бля! Игорь!
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 407 of the news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of a brand new week of the war in Ukraine. Day 406 was the last day of the last week, and today is the beginning of a new week of the war. And so this week has started off with something that is incredibly exceptional, as we've gotten the first recorded video evidence ever of an armed uprising occurring within the borders of the Russian Federation. Armed firefights in between partisans and Russian forces have been occurring within Ukrainian-occupied territory, most specifically within the areas of Crimea and also the cities of Melitopol and Mariupol, but we have never seen armed uprisings making it within the Russian Federation itself from within the nation. And particularly the area we saw it from was one of the areas that we expected many months ago, the area of the southern border, otherwise known as Circassia in the 19th century and nowadays known as, I guess you could say, the Caucasus Mountain Range region. It's made up of multiple oblasts. One of the most famous at this moment is the one of Chechnya, where both Chechen wars occurred, and also where the Chechen Kadyrov come from. But just over to the west of Chechnya and in between the province of, and you wouldn't believe it, I'm forgetting the name of that province. I'm terribly sorry, everyone. But this one,
It's somewhere
Dagestan.
in there.
It's Chechnya and Dagestan is the Oblast of Ingushetia. I believe I'm getting the name of that correctly. And today we saw a video of an armed uprising occurring. This is the only video that we got of it. There has not been a lot of news coming out from the Russian government or any news sources for that matter about this armed uprising, but we did hear a firefight occur within one of the towns in the Ingushetia Oblast, specifically the ones in Zazakov Yurt. Here's the video. We can see a cameraman looking around, and we can now hear firefights occurring further down the way. It sounds about 300, 400 yards away. We can now hear even more firefights occurring further down the street. These appear to be originating from the car further down, and also from the side of the road over here. The firefights are intense, showing that that partisans may be facing down Russian forces themselves within the area of this town. The camera right here is capturing Russian military trucks also moving into the city as these firefights continue. Of course, not a lot of information is known at the moment about this armed uprising, how large it is, and how much damage it's caused the Russian military and the Russian government, but as we can see at the end of this video, Russian forces are being moved into the area, which shows that this uprising may be serious enough to require military intervention from the Russian forces. Many months of tensions have culminated into this armed uprising in this area of Ingushetia, Dagestan, and also Chechnya. During the 300,000 partial mobilization that occurred around 6 months ago last year, there were a large amount of riots and protests that occurred within Dagestan, Ingushetia, and Chechnya as well, as many of the conscripts were actually being taken from these specific oblasts. This caused a massive resentment from what we could tell in these areas, and even the local governments at that time started to come under attack from rioters. As the months have progressed, we've seen that tensions have continued to rise in between the local governments and the citizenry of this area, and now we can see that apparently it's now boiled over into an armed uprising. We do not know if this armed uprising has already been crushed or if it's continuing. The Russian government is keeping a very tight lid on information coming out of these oblasts at the moment, and that is the only video we have of proof of the armed uprising at this moment. It is also not isolated entirely on its own either. We saw an armed uprising occurring within the area of Crimea just yesterday, where armed partisans began a fight in the area around Simferopol. Sorry, the name of that town is really hard for me to get, but in the area of Simferopol, and I still think I'm getting that wrong, there was an armed uprising there as well that the Russian armed forces had to attempt to put down. I believe that that one actually was quite short-lived. The number of forces that we believe were involved in that skirmish, from what we could tell, was estimated to be around 30, so it was quite a small uprising force, and may have just been a hit and run on Russian forces in the area. This also coincides with an announcement made around 2 days ago of Putin warning the Russian public that acts of terrorism were most likely going to start to increase over the coming days, which shows as telltale proof that Putin may have been seeing that civil unrest within some parts of Russia, like the Caucasus Mountain Range, is rising so heavily that armed uprisings were inevitable, and so the announcement was made to put them under the guise of terrorist attacks more so than armed uprisings against the Russian government itself. We're now going to be moving on from the area of southern Russia and on into the international news, specifically up into the Bryansk area, which is once again in Russia. As we saw, the Freedom of Russia Legion, or more so the Free Russian Militia from Ukraine, cross the border and begin to occupy villages in that area of Russia again. These small probing attacks appear to be an attempt to tie up Russian resources in other parts of the front line that are not involved in active fighting in the south and to the east. And so here's the clip. We can see the Russian emblem popping up right here. And the Russian Volunteer Corps is beginning to pack up. We're going to have to mute the music because we do not know if it's copyrighted. But we can see them discussing most likely their plans right here, and we can see that apparently they've already made it into Russia, and here's the subtitles of what this man's saying. We are the Russian Volunteer Corps, the unit that fights against Putin and his army. Tell me, what is your village called? Sluchevsk? What region? Bryansk region. And so, real quick, just to confirm where this is, let's pull up Sluchevsk on the map. So, Sluchevsk. I spelled it wrong. Dang it. Here we go. Sluchevsk in the Bryansk Oblast. So let's zoom out. So this is right where the marker is, exactly. I had to make sure that I did geolocate this correctly as well. And it appears that Ukrainian forces just crossed the border and moved in about a mile to this incredibly small village. We can see it right here, and it looks like it's only home to maybe 100 or a few hundred people. So an incredibly small village, but once again threatening Russian border security and requiring a large amount of Russian forces to patrol the borders to make sure that incursions like these don't happen often. This is our motherland, it says the Russian Volunteer. Is Moscow far away from here? Oh, well, Bryansk is 165 kilometers away. And then the soldier comes inside of the small compound. Please give these flyers to your friends and have a good day. Try to spend the next couple of hours in a shelter. There are shellings currently. We are fighting Putin's criminal regime. Please take cover. A very polite statement from an armed soldier that's crossed over from his country into Russia. But still, got to give him credit. And we can see that the Russian Volunteer Corps appears to perhaps be engaging Russian forces, although we do not see them on film. They're now moving through a wooded area, most likely near the village, back towards the Ukrainian border. We can now see them advancing into another part of the village. We now see them hiding in the tall reeds. And the video ends right there. But once again, another border incursion by the Russian Volunteer Corps. And this also proves a lie of the Russians that the Russian Volunteer Corps was destroyed during the last incursion they made. We never had any real proof or evidence to actually contradict that claim, so it was kind of taken at face value that the Russians may have been telling a little bit of truth at that point, that they either inflicted heavy losses on the Russian Volunteer Corps during their last border incursions or completely wiped them out. But this video shows proof that they are still fully strengthed and they're able to cross the border and still commit incursions. It appears that the Russians have also not attempted to strengthen their border security, as it appears that these soldiers crossed without any resistance whatsoever and was able to make it to the village without meeting Russian forces until hours after they crossed. We're now going to be moving on into the western area of Ukraine, now that we've covered most of the Russian-based news for today, and into the area of Lviv, which seems to be the headquarters of most Western support that has been entering the country. And of course, I believe there may be a poll that has already been thrown up or will be thrown up about Western support to Ukraine, and some information that was released to the public a little preemptively today. But moving on from that and into the area of Lviv, we saw that strikers have been transported into Ukraine. This is the first recorded video instance of that, and we can see that they are now training on Ukrainian-based training grounds instead of Polish or German training grounds. We can see the clip right here. Well, you see this one passing with what appears to be some kind of a mine-clearing device on the front of it, and then followed up by the normal Striker APC. Well, you see that they also have the turret covered with a tarp, and we can now see the video repeating and showing the mine-clearing device on the first Striker. But very interesting to see that these Striker APCs have finally made it into Ukraine and will be used by Ukrainian forces on the front line sometime soon. The Striker does provide a much needed advantage over the Russians in terms of the maneuverability that these APCs are able to pull off. They are a little bit faster and more maneuverable even off-road than most Russian and current Ukrainian APCs are by any category. They certainly blow the M113s in terms of speed out of the water. Crew protection, however, is not that improved. Of course, the armor is paper thin. It is an armored personnel carrier after all, not a light tank or a main battle tank, so the armor is only enough to stop small arms fire. Anything larger than a small arm, and it most likely will puncture through the armor. Nevertheless, the maneuverability and speed of the APC should protect it from most fire. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from that little clip and into our next bit of Western news, where we saw some newly raised brigades. Oh my god, I gotta get the wordage down right eventually. I gotta learn how to speak English at some point. Anyways, we saw that there were some newly raised brigades, and while Starsky has not been on our channel in a good while, I believe ever since the year anniversary of the war, I did talk to Starsky just yesterday to interview him about the Battle of Hostomel for a paper I'm writing in college. And one thing that is really interesting that he told me is that the Ukrainians have raised 9 brand new brigades of Western-based units for the large part. And when I say Western-based, I mean almost all of their equipment and technology is from the West and supported by countries like the United States, the British, the French, the Germans, the Canadians, Australians, and so on. And so this is quite interesting to me because he said it clearly. All 9 of these brigades are intended to be spearheads for the upcoming counteroffensive in a few weeks. And we saw a clip of one of these newly raised brigades still in training in, I guess you could say, the western area of Ukraine. This is the 116th Mechanized Brigade, and unfortunately we cannot tell what kind of SPGs they are. They actually look like 2 S1s, which may be a little bit of a Ukrainian holdover that's being moved into these units, but of course it is artillery after all. From what we understand, it is more so the vehicles themselves, the offensive vehicles like tanks and armored personnel carriers and other infantry equipment that will be used in direct combat against the Russians that is Western. A few of the things in these units, like these 2 S1s, are still from Ukrainian supply, I guess you could say, bases. And so with that, here's the clip. And you see them now commanding the SPGs to fire. And we can now see them firing. We can now see the video end, but a very interesting look, and something incredibly interesting as well about this video is that the elevation of the guns on these 2 S1s is so low that they are being used in direct fire. And we don't really see SPGs of this variant being used like this. Their armor, much like an APC, is so thin that anything larger than a small arm can punch right through them. And so I do not know if this is an attempt to try and train tankers on how to operate the gunnery of a tank while also not having a tank around, or if this is actually just direct fire training for the artillery, because we don't really see this a lot in combat. In fact, I don't think we've ever seen an SPG used in direct fire like this, unless it was the Russians way early on in the war last year during March and April. We haven't seen it since then. So very interesting to see them direct firing like this. Well, of course, with that, that's the end of the clip. Just wanted to play it a second time, just in case if any of y'all did not notice the direct fire that the SPGs were pulling off. And a very interesting video as well, and once again showing that the Ukrainians certainly are gearing up for this counteroffensive that will be coming in just several weeks' time, most likely around 2 to 4 weeks away. We're now going to be moving down into the area of Odesa, and today we heard that the Ukrainian SBU once again caught another collaborator within the area of the city of Odesa. This collaborator apparently never got the notice that the Russian naval invasion was not happening, which was scrubbed about an entire year ago at this point. But they've been collecting, over the course of the entire war, from what we understand, news and information about Ukrainian defensive positions within the area of Odesa and units. We can see that she actually created a Telegram, or maybe even a WhatsApp, to share this information with other collaborators in the city, and also the FSB as well, to try and help Russian forces if they were ever to attempt a naval invasion of the city, or to attempt a land invasion from the direction of Mykolaiv. Of course, we would never see this come to fruition. The Russians were defeated outside of Mykolaiv and then forced back across the Dnieper River in December, so they never really got the chance to use any of this information. But it is interesting to see that they did catch another collaborator, and they'll most likely be sending her to the courts to be tried for her alleged crimes and see whether she's guilty or not, and then if she's guilty, what kind of punishment she will face. We're now going to be moving on.
No, something I've never understood is, do the collaborators get paid by Russia, or are they simply against Ukraine?
I don't really know what it is with collaborators like that. I don't think they are getting paid because, you know, there's a lot of pro-Russians around the world. Well, not a lot of them. There's actually a pretty small amount of them, but they're all over the world and they're not getting paid. They're not on anyone's payroll and they're just pro-Russian for the hell of it, or they're pro-Russian because they think there's some benefit in it for them. So maybe they're just pro-Russian for the hell of it. I would say there is certainly a chance for dissenters, because if you look throughout all of history, there were pro-Nazis in the United States during the Second World War. There were anti-Nazis in Germany during the Second World War, anti-communists in the Soviet Union. There's always small groups of dissenters, and it looks like these, a few of them, are actually getting into the realm of trying to conduct intelligence on the Ukrainians, their very own countrymen and citizens, to hand them over to a unfortunate fate by the hands of the Russians. Pretty crazy to think when you think about it.
Yeah, it seems like if they weren't getting paid, it seems like they would simply just move to Russia if they love it, if they love that country so much, instead of sitting there, you know, betraying their own countrymen.
Yeah, you would think they would, but you know, of course, people are a little delusional. You know, like for example, there's a very incredibly small group in America that thinks that the world would be better if it was run by Russia, and I don't think they understand that once Russia comes here and they realize that it's not sunshine and rainbows, if they criticize the Russian government, you get 2 bullets in the back of the head and you get dropped off in the kindergarten sandlot. You know, it's not going to be a fun day for them once they realize what's really behind the Russians. But still, I think these people are just delusional and support the Russians because they think they're right, which is insane. And of course, it's a little bit alleged. And I actually see some people talking about this in the live chat real quick, so I'll address it. Yes, we have heard about James Vasquez. We've actually addressed that over several weeks at this point, because that happened a while ago. And that's why we always say on this channel, and I'll never stop saying it, to always vet the sources that you're donating to for fundraisers. It's incredibly important, because if someone is not legally obligated to send the money where they're telling you to send it, there is a good chance that they may be running off with it. That's not to say that everyone who does that is doing that, but I still say if there is no legal, I guess you could say, ground where it is enforced that if you donate to them, it must go somewhere, like on a YouTube Give fundraiser or to a registered nonprofit in the United States, there is a chance that the funds could be absconded with. So always be careful with that. That's one thing we always tell everybody, and that's why we always encourage to only donate through YouTube fundraisers. Not just ours that we run on Sundays, but anyone else's. There are other channels out there that do run YouTube Give fundraisers like we do. And I would say that those are certainly the safest way to donate and help out Ukraine. There's also another incredibly safe way, which is to just donate directly to United 24. But those are really the only 2 ways I would say to support Ukraine, because those are guaranteed safe ways where you know where the money is going. And of course, for everyone else in between that doesn't fall under those 2 categories, just make sure you really, really trust them when sending them donations to go to the Ukrainian military. Make sure you really trust them, because it could end up like James Vasquez. A lot of people ended up trusting that guy, although we were always, you know, saying make sure to, you know, scrutinize the stuff, make sure to be careful. And then some people learned a little too late that they paid the price. But that's always why we say to vet your fundraising sources incredibly well. With that, we're now going to be moving on from the area of Odessa and that point, and on into our location unknown news. We didn't have a large amount of them today. We only had 5 location unknowns, including the casualty report. And interestingly enough, before we even get to the casualty report, I'll let y'all know it is incredibly low today, and we're not really sure why it is that low, but we'll have a couple of speculations and may even try and make it into a poll. And so with that, we're now moving into our first clip of Location Unknown News, where we saw a Ukrainian FPV drone pilot skillfully fly his drone directly into the Russians. And so, here's the video. Of course, we gotta mute the music, but we can see the FPV drone flying into a largely destroyed house somewhere on the outskirts of a small village. We can see it flying on in, and You see it fly right into a shed. We can actually see a Russian right there, and I think his day just got a lot worse. I guess you could say that his temperament is certainly going to be explosive for a small second. The drone then, of course, cuts its feed, and then the video just says game over. And I'm not doubting it. I think the game is over for that unfortunate guy, and it looks like the drone got him. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from that bit of location unknown news and on into our next bit, where we saw some training footage from the Ukrainian armed forces as they continuously, behind the lines, train more and more forces to get involved in the war. Of course, it is not a one-sided affair that the Russians are having to raise more manpower and more troops, but it's always hilarious to watch the Russians do it because they said the war would be over in 3 days, and now they're having to constantly mobilize more and more conscripts to deal with the overwhelming amount of losses that they've been taking within Ukraine. Of course, as more Russian forces get involved in the theater and more Russian buildups occur, the Ukrainians also have to do the same, and they also have to account for the losses they've been taking as well. And so we can see that an entire new, I believe it's an airborne brigade, is being mobilized and trained here in this video. We can see that a lot of these guys actually have some really advanced equipment. Even for Soviet standard weapons, they are top-notch. We can now see them getting out of the helicopter and creating a perimeter. We now see them surveying the area, and one thing I'd like to note here, because I know a lot of our gun fanatics will be really blown away by this guy's got a SCAR with a bipod and also a pretty nice scope. I don't know a lot about scopes, to be honest with y'all, but that one looks quite nice. Also, SCARs are really expensive.
I think that's an ACOG, but yeah, that guy is kitted. It's even got a front, foregrip on it. Looks like a bipod, too.
Yeah, and this one also looks like a SCAR. I don't know if these are the SCAR Heavy or the SCAR that shoots the 5.56. It kind of looks like, from the size of the rounds, at least from what we can see in that mag, it may be the 5.56 version of the SCAR, which would be more logical for the Ukrainians to pick because they have a lot of M4 carbines and M16s in service right now in the Ukrainian armed forces, and all of those use the 5.56 caliber, and so for standardization purposes of ammo, it is probably a lot more efficient for them to use the SCARs that fire the 5.56 NATO round instead of the 7.62 or 308 round. We can now see more airborne troops unloading from the Mi-18s. We can now see a soldier running across the field with an M240, and now the units are beginning to advance. We can now see them firing off RPGs. We don't know if those are duds or live rounds because we haven't seen one explode downrange. We can now see them practicing some target shooting with the SCARs, loading up an RPK. And I gotta tell you, those SCARs are something. Maybe one day we'll get to review one, but it's not going to be anytime soon because those things cost an arm and a leg.
Yeah, FN needs to lower the price on those things because we need one.
Dude,
we need an enforcer wrap SCAR.
Yeah, we do! That would be so cool. That would be really cool. We can now see the Mi-18s taking off and leaving after dropping off the airborne troops. And we can now see the airborne troops advancing through the training field. Unfortunately, I still can't read Ukrainian. It's been an entire 407 days actually, still can't read it. But a very interesting video of the Ukrainian Airborne Brigade, or at least a part of the brigade that is training on airborne operations, and hopefully they'll be very successful once the counteroffensive begins. We're now moving on into our next bit of news, where we saw some Ukrainian soldiers coming up with a very ingenious way to rotisserie chicken on the battlefield. This is called a field expedient rotisserie. I call this redneck rotisserie, but nonetheless, here's the video. You'll see why I call it redneck, because I swear I've seen this somewhere in Alabama before on our travels. They're using a power drill on a low speed setting and a bar with some sticks to rotisserie the chicken, and they also have a drone flying above it. I don't know why, but that's actually really smart. That's that kind of redneck level smart, you know?
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. Raise hell, praise Dale. You know what I mean? But anyways, really, really neat to see. I've never seen something like this in Ukraine so far. And you got to give it to the Ukrainians. They are very creative with what they have, which is just a power drill, an iron rod, what looks to be kind of like a cardboard box, which is kind of weird, and a chicken. And they were able to rotisserie a chicken with just these few things. And you can too for the price of 69. I'm just kidding. But anyways, with that, we're now moving on.
Hey, like George Tencher said, the drone's probably carrying the seasoning. It's dropping the seasoning on it.
Yeah, oh, dude, if it was doing that, that would be crazy. But with that, we are on to the next clip, where you can see Russian positions being hit by HIMARS today. Apparently, from what we understand, this was actually filmed by Russian forces. One of the missiles was intercepted by a Pantsir S-1, and we'll see it explode in air. The second missile did hit its position dead on. So here's the video. And you see the Russians looking around, and we can see one of the HIMARS missiles get hit, and we can see the second one hit dead onto its target. We haven't seen any more flashes, but due to the amount of reports we're hearing, we may be able to assume that while we didn't see the explosions on the horizon, several other missiles may have made it to their target, with only one missile being shot down just right before it hit the target. It's impressive to see these HIMARS in operation. These things have a pinpoint accuracy at a range of 50 miles. It is the only MLRS in the war that can hit a really like a 3x3 foot size target from nearly 50 miles away. It is absolutely impressive. And it's unbelievable to think that the Ukrainians have had these for so long, and they provided a vital shield to the Ukrainian infantry whenever things get rough, or whenever the Russians get too well supplied. They roll in the HIMARS and either wipe away the Russian forces on the front, or wipe away their supplies that keep them running on those front lines. We're now going to be moving on from this bit of location unknown news, and on to our last bit, which is the location unknowns. And today's location unknowns were incredibly interesting, as the losses in most categories were actually quite low. Of course, we can see that the Bobcat skid steer talk is still going on. Pretty
Three
freaking
Bobcats.
good.
We hit over that 300 mark too, by the way, that I was talking about yesterday.
Yeah, that's nice. And so many Bobcats, loads of them. I gotta thank everyone who keeps doing that, because that's really cool that the inside joke on this channel has made it onto the open fields of Twitter. But of course,
I think we've seen pretty much every picture of a burned Bobcat that Google Images has to offer at this point.
Yes, I think Google Images is like running out of burning Bobcat pictures. I think they're running low on supply, and the demand is so high, but the supply was already so low. If any of y'all can, make sure to take your Bobcat skid steers outside and light them on fire so we can get some more pictures. I'm just kidding, don't do that, because I'm not going to be sued for property damage. Do not do that. But still, it is impressive to see that 3 Bobcat skid steers were destroyed. That's actually a very high number over this one day. And of course, I have to clarify this. They're not all Bobcat skid steers. They are special equipment vehicles. These could be bulldozers. They could be excavators. Anything that is largely in the construction equipment field is usually considered special equipment. In every other category today, however, the losses were incredibly low. In fact, a decent amount below the war's average. For example, only 390 Russian soldiers have been put to sleep over the past 24 hours. This is an incredibly low number compared to even the war average around 450 to 550 per day. This is a marked about 70 decrease even from the lowest average figure. 8 armored personnel carriers were destroyed today, however, which is getting on towards the average, but considering that only 390 troops were killed over the past 24 hours, we can assume that this was not due to an overwhelming amount of armored support, because we're not seeing these losses in these categories. We only saw 2 tanks get destroyed today as well over the past 48 hours, around $6 million in tank losses, but still not on average with what we've been seeing over the war, which has been around 4 to 5 tanks per day. We also saw that only 1 supply vehicle was destroyed over the course of the past 24 hours, meaning that Russian supplies were hardly interdicted today, and most of the supplies may have made it to the front lines to help the Russian forces eke by survival for at least another few days. We also saw that 7 artillery systems were also destroyed. This is actually a little bit above average. One of the few numbers we got today, rather than the Bobcat skid steer numbers, that is above average. This is about 2 artillery batteries worth of artillery pieces destroyed, but unfortunately, we do not have a breakdown of what exact kinds of artillery systems these are. They could be mortars, SPGs, or they could be towed artillery pieces. Nevertheless, 7 of them were destroyed. And finally, 4 drones were destroyed, and 1 helicopter and 1 anti-aircraft warfare system was destroyed somewhere today. Once again, however, these losses are quite low, and they are suggesting that several things may be happening. Of course, it's anyone's guess which one of them they are, but here are the possible options. It could be that Ukrainian forces are I guess you could say, redrawing their defensive lines within the city of Bakhmut. And so we're seeing a decrease in losses as Russian forces are not being engaged by Ukrainian infantry a large amount today. This could be because of the artillery shortage we've been hearing about in Bakhmut, and it could be that the Ukrainians had to roll back a large amount of their artillery barrages, which is how most Russian soldiers do end up meeting their demise, and that could also be leading to a decrease in numbers. It may be the fact that Russian forces, and of course this is, in my opinion, one of the least likely options because as a historical precedent throughout the war, this just has never been the case. It could be that the Russian forces have finally got their act together and are pushing somewhat effectively within the city of Bakhmut. But I'm heavily doubting that because over the course of a 6-month battle for Bakhmut, they've never gotten it together and they've always been losing astronomical losses whenever they run directly into Ukrainian infantry. So I would have to go with either it's a lack of artillery shells on the Ukrainians' end or the Ukrainians are redrawing their defensive lines at this moment, and so the Russians are not engaging the Ukrainians as frequently as they were the other day. With that, we're now going to be moving on from this casualty report and on into the frontline news itself. And there is a lot of it today. It doesn't look like it's widespread. Most of the news we got today was surrounding the city of Bakhmut. But before we get into any of that news, Matthew, of course, put up some exquisite polls. And when I say exquisite, I mean they're more exquisite than that rotisserie chicken we saw being cooked up with a power drill. They are unbelievably good. Even better than the seasoning that was so gracefully being dropped from the bottom of that DJI Mavic. And so we have to address them. It is the law. And so with that, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so of course, we have 3 polls to address, and the very first one we have says, China announced it will stop and inspect ships sailing through the Taiwan Strait, and what are your thoughts? 38% said it's a prelude to war and very serious, 7% said unsure, 28% said it could be serious, and 27% said it's simply a bluff and only posturing. And if y'all been following the China-Taiwan situation pretty closely, you'll know that China has done this in response to the Taiwanese president coming to the U.S. To meet with the congressional majority leader or Speaker of the House. That's it. They're doing it in response to that. They didn't like that happening, so this is what they're going to do instead. They've also placed ships around the island of Taiwan as well. So all of that is kind of their response. I would personally say that this is something very serious. I think China will not stop a U.S. ship. I don't think they'll be that stupid, but I think they will try to stop a Taiwanese ship, and they've already said they are not going to comply. And if a merchant ship is harassed, they're going to call in their own Navy ships to come in and deal with the situation. So very, very, very tense situation. And I think China might actually carry it out, which could be a prelude to war. So I'm with the 38%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would also have to be with the 38% that this is a serious issue. However, I do not think that the Chinese intend to go to war with Taiwan because although the Chinese military is rapidly expanding in size and ability, the Chinese still at this moment do not possess the naval abilities to launch a successful land invasion of Taiwan. Their navy just does not have enough transport ships, and it also would not be able to supply a large enough force that it would be able to go up against the Taiwanese army once they reach the island of Taiwan itself. For that reason in mind, it seems to me that while it is a tense situation and the Chinese are certainly trying to ramp up the pressure, it's most likely to try and get a diplomatic play started where they can get some sort of concessions that will lead them to have a more advantageous position over Taiwan, also called the Republic of China, which is its real name. So I think it's more so for diplomatic leverage than it is to actually try and start a war, because one thing that countries do not really like to do, and it's usually a last resort, unlike the war in Ukraine, is to go to war. Usually, countries try and force people's hand where it looks like they're about to go to war, so that way a diplomatic negotiation will begin, and hopefully they can get some kind of concessions that benefit them. So I believe that this, I guess you could say, claimed seizure of ships in the Taiwan Strait is most likely going to try and provoke some kind of incident similar to that, so that way they can go to the diplomatic negotiating table with the United States, Taiwan, and maybe the Western world as a whole, considering actually the entire Western world supports the Republic of China at this moment. And so with that, I hope that does address the poll fairly well, in my opinion. And do you have anything else to say about that, Matthew? Because I think you and me are viewing this as either war or a route to negotiations. What do you think about it?
I personally don't think it's pressure tactics. I think China has gotten really angered by us entertaining the president of Taiwan in America. They warned us of this before it happened. Now, I'm not saying we should have bowed to China's pressure and not allowed the Taiwanese president to visit, But I think it is going to have consequences, and it could be dire because look at this: if China tries to stop a Taiwanese vessel, and the Taiwanese Navy comes out to defend that vessel, I mean, the only outcome that could have would be, they end up firing on each other, unless China decides to back down, and I simply don't think they will.
But the chances, considering, and also, real quick, I'm gonna have to make a statement, and you can make a rebuttal to it, but we gotta make sure to keep this thing going because I just remember we have like 30 other clips of news to cover before the news segment's even over. But I believe at this moment, the Chinese Navy is announcing that they're going to be seizing and stopping ships in the Taiwan Strait if needed, and the Taiwanese are most likely going to send out surface ships of their navy to escort their own merchant ships through the strait. And so if the Chinese ever try and stop these ships, it will create the diplomatic incident where there will be a standoff in between the two navies. There probably won't be any shots exchanged, and if they are, there'll be warning shots, and then that'll create a tense enough situation that the entire world goes, oh, we need to go to the negotiating table before an actual war breaks out, and then the Chinese will most likely try and leverage their position over Taiwan to get some kind of concessions to their advantage.
Hopefully that would be the case, but I have a feeling that China's looking for an excuse to go ahead and start the invasion. And if Taiwan makes the aggressive move by bringing out their navy to defend their ship, that might give them the out that they're looking for to start the thing.
Well, interesting points. That actually would be a good poll, Matthew. That would be a really great poll to see what people think about, because that's an interesting discussion. And honestly, I could see it going your direction as well. So do you think, I know we already have pre-made polls, but do you think you could throw one up on that real quick so that way we can see what folks think about that, whether it's a attempt to immediately start a war or an attempt for diplomatic leverage? And so with that, let's move on to the next one real quick and get into that one, and then we'll throw up that poll.
All right, so let me go ahead and make a note. There we go. So the next poll says, Ukraine says it is open for negotiations with Russia regarding Crimea under certain circumstances, and what are your thoughts? 45% said that is sensible on Ukraine's part, 17% said unsure, another 17% said it seems inconsistent, and 21% said that's a very bad decision. Now, while I was making this poll, I just looked and saw that Ukraine has come out and issued a correction. Apparently, the statement came out of the president's office from a high-level official, but other Ukrainian officials are now coming out and saying that is not the official position of Ukraine, and actually, they will never entertain negotiations to let go of Crimea, and they do plan on trying to retake it. So it seems like there might be some internal disagreements about the situation. Kind of interesting there, but I would say that the statement coming out of the president's office seems inconsistent. Ukraine has taken a very hardline stance on keeping all of their territory and even trying to retake territory that Russia had already gotten prior to the invasion starting recently. So I would have to go with the other officials that recently came out and rebutted the statement. I would not give up Crimea. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say the Ukrainians giving up Crimea is incredibly bad for both the United States strategically and also for their future strategically. I would say it's incredibly important and very pertinent for the Ukrainians to attempt and to continue to strive to retake the peninsula of Crimea. That is an incredibly important peninsula. It's the only warm water port that the Russians have at this moment, meaning that they can project naval power around the world and conduct the kind of diplomatic plays that I was talking about just a second ago in the polls about China and Taiwan that we don't necessarily want. If we can get the Russians out of Sevastopol port in Crimea, they will have to move that navy elsewhere. It will not be to Novorossiysk. It's just not large enough of a port. Otherwise, they would have kept the Black Sea Fleet there instead of in Sevastopol. They would have to move north to a port like St. Petersburg, Murmansk, or maybe even circumnavigate the entire world to Vladivostok, or spread the entire fleet out and reintegrate it into those fleets in those areas. It is incredibly important, not just for Ukraine to reclaim their territory because that's a part of their war goals and strategic interests. It's also important to the United States for that reason that we'll be able to stop the Russians from conducting any of their own diplomatic plays in the Middle East, and that will allow us a relative zone of control over this area that will also help us to thwart the Chinese Silk Road project that's currently stretching out into Central Asia, the Middle East, and East Africa to try and build a pretty much indestructible sphere of influence that nobody would be able to interdict unless we were friends with the Middle East, India, or Sri Lanka. And so with that, I hope that addresses that poll, in my opinion, fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And with that being said, that was our last poll for now, but that other poll that the enforcer mentioned will be going up shortly. But with that being said, we're moving into our super chat questions. And up first, we have a very generous $20 super chat from Philip Nicholson. He says, I think you may need to start a new channel to cover things between China and Taiwan. And I heard China is going to stop and inspect any ships passing through the strait. And that's funny he mentions that.
Yeah,
he
funny.
says it sounds like a prelude to war. That's exactly almost what the poll said. But I agree with you completely, Philip. It sounds very sketchy. And when people start blockading and boarding ships and threatening to do so, and you have the other side saying they're not going to comply, that's a recipe for a disaster.
And I would, of course, I thank you for the support, and I think that is an interesting idea to start a second channel. We have covered some Chinese Taiwan topics on this channel in videos, not streams. Unfortunately, we would never be able to create live streams that go into the same level of depth and detail and also are the same length of time that we are on the Ukraine war, because there's only so much time in a day, unfortunately, and so we couldn't really dedicate that much time to it. It would more so have to be a side thing happening on this channel about what's going on over there. Now, with that in mind, I would have to disagree on the idea of it being a prelude to war. In my opinion, it looks more so like a diplomatic play. Just to me, of course, I'm thinking historically of the XYZ affair, which many of y'all may remember as a lead up to the War of 1812. U.S. ships would trade in between France and the United Kingdom, and during the Napoleonic Wars, both of these countries were at war. And so both countries, both the British Empire and also the French, would stop and even seize U.S. vessels at sea because they may be carrying cargo from to the United Kingdom, which France would stop, or they may be carrying cargo to France, which the British would then stop. That never led to all-out war, but it did lead to a diplomatic incident that's known as the XYZ affair, as U.S. diplomats were sent to France, and they literally got the runaround. They dealt with the entire French bureaucracy in one sitting, which angered the United States so much against France that it became a huge diplomatic row, both in France and in the United States at that time. That would seem to be a pretty good historical precedent to apply to the China-Taiwan situation, as I do believe in a similar instances that it's trying to leverage the situation that we're seeing right now to try and get some kind of diplomatic concessions. And by the British and the French both seizing American ships, they were trying to leverage a diplomatic play where the United States would agree to only send cargo to one country or the other, and in a sense align itself with either the British or the French. So with that, I hope that addresses that that super chat fairly well, and thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. A very good point. I honestly think that while I disagree, it is as equal an argument to say that they could possibly be going to war, but I still think in a way it is most likely for diplomatic leverage, as countries usually tend to avoid war because war isn't as profitable as most people think it is. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. Long live the Lee Spring Army, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next two we have are from Sean and also Luis Vesquez, who puts in a $20 donation apiece. And thank you very much, Sean and Luis, for helping to keep the channel running, and we do appreciate it very much. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank y'all both so much for the support. They didn't both leave comments?
No comments on either one,
Oh,
sadly.
man! But still, I thank y'all so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Y'all did not leave comments, but the support is greatly appreciated. I thank y'all so much for enjoying this channel enough that y'all would find it worthwhile supporting it. And of course, through y'all's appreciation, y'all are helping us to keep the lights on and helping this thing to keep on running. And so with that, thank y'all once again. I hope that addresses both of them fairly well. I wish y'all left comments because I would be more than happy to address any questions or comments y'all have. But of course, with that, we are on to the next one. And thank y'all so much once again. And so with that, I believe we are on to the last one of this segment.
And yes, this is the last one of the segment, and it goes to Ron Anderson, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Ron, for the support. He says, I think we need to start a Bobcat fund. Fulfill one of those match dreams. And please do a live chat question. And Ron, if we're ordering Bobcats, I will take one of those militarized, like, Bobcats that is shipped out to California.
SWAT Bobcat.
Yeah, I need one of those SWAT Bobcats. That's what I need. It probably costs like, what, a $500,000 or some crazy amount?
Oh my, yeah, it probably does. Look at this thing.
Yeah, I want that, man. That's the king of the Bobcats.
Dude, it's literally just a glorified battering ram. It really is just a battering ram because this thing is just a massive ram on a Bobcat that's armored. How much do these things cost?
I haven't seen that on a battlefield or anywhere except for an American city.
Oh my God! It costs as much as a
Jeez.
BMP. Dude, I would rather get a
That's
BMP
nuts.
at that cost. I would rather get a BMP than that thing.
Yeah, that is crazy that an American police department paid that much for a Bobcat.
That's ridiculous. And like, I don't see any kind of upgrades to a Bobcat being worth an additional $250,000, considering a Bobcat nowadays costs around 50 grand. You're adding a whole $250,000 on in price just for some armor upgrades and to add a giant battering ram to it. That doesn't even seem worth it. But anyways, with that, thank you for the support. We will put that towards the Bobcat fund. Sadly, we're going to have to lower Matthew's expectations a little bit because the SWAT Bobcat's out of the picture. But a real Bobcat, a normal one, that might be in the picture, especially if it's from AliExpress for like $5,000 and some dreams. But with that, we're going to be moving on to that live chat that you requested. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on rolling.
All right, and the live chat sponsored by Ron Anderson goes to Rob Iceman. And I hope you're doing good tonight, Rob, and it's good to see you once again. He says, did you hear about the Russians pulling their heavy equipment out of Crimea in mass?
I have not, actually. And also, it's good to hear from you, Rob, because I actually checked on you last night. I hope you're doing better. Of course, not going to get into a lot of personal details because that's your thing, you're my thing. But I hope you're doing better because I completely understand what you're going through. I've had some friends that I knew back in the past, of course not around anymore, but they also went through similar things, and I remember talking to them about those similar things, so I completely understand where you were, and I'm very glad to have you back, and I hope that you're doing better. But to address that question, I have not heard about a mass armor withdrawal within the area of Crimea. I would not doubt it. I would most likely suppose that they are being moved out of Crimea and up into the southern front, or even out of the country through the land bridge. There is chance for railroad traffic to cross the Crimean bridge. It was not completely out. During the video we saw of the bridge repairs, we did see 2 trains cross it, which seems as though it's working on reduced traffic, considering it's only a one-way bridge at this moment. So it may be the case that they're able to move them out from the Crimean bridge, but most of the railroad traffic right now is going to be moving through the land bridge from Crimea to Melitopol to Mariupol and then on out of Ukraine. So I haven't heard about that. But those are most likely the 2 routes they're possibly going if that is the case. And of course, I would have reported on that if I had found it, but, you know, if I had said something like that, I'm sure someone out there in the world would be going, call them out, call them out. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope we answered that question fairly well. And of course, welcome back, Rob. It's good to have you back, and I hope you're doing better again. Just to make sure to reiterate that again, because you've been around here forever, as far as I can recall. I can't really think of a time where you weren't here, and that is that's unfortunate to know that you went through something like that. But I hope that you'll be around to stay. And so with that, I thank you once again. I hope that answers all the questions fairly well that we have so far, and we're going to be moving on into the northeastern front. Of course, the northeastern front is largely quiet, and over the past 24 hours, we haven't seen a lot of frontline developments in this area. Of course, backing up over the past 24 hours, right here. And as you can see, there's been no frontline developments over nearly 150 miles of the front line that we call the Northeast. However, there have been a couple of isolated incidents of activity where Ukrainian and Russian forces have clashed, and I believe, if I'm correct, a T-90M did meet the end of its life. Nope, sorry, that's actually down here in Berestove. I got that wrong. T-90M met the end of his life down here, but we're not there yet. So starting off with our first clip of news in the northeast near Krasnorachinske, we saw a Ukrainian soldier firing an MG3. And so if the video eventually loads, we'll eventually watch it.
Our internet's acting funny again tonight.
Yeah, it's acting really funky. But anyways, here's the clip. And here's something interesting I do have to say. He's holding it wrong. And I know some people are about to go, oh yeah, you what do you know? I've actually shot an MG42 before, and the MG42 is just an older iteration of the MG3 for the large part. What the soldier should be doing to fire it is that you should have one hand on the pistol grip like he has, and then put the second hand on the stock right here where the mouse cursor is. That's the best way to stabilize an MG42 style machine gun, because there really is no practical way to hold the thing unless if it's mounted on a bipod on the ground and you have one hand on the stock and one hand on the pistol grip. That's the best way to do it. But, you know, still, it looks like he was getting effective fire down range. What's so interesting about the MG3s is that unlike the 50 cal, which is a machine gun, the MG3 is a piece of art and is able to fire incredibly small and controlled bursts like we can see right here.
And this is a Russian?
No, this is a Ukrainian.
Oh, Ukrainian? Oh, I was about to say, I'd pay him 1,000,000 rubles for that if that was a Russian. It's like 20 bucks.
And you know, what's really interesting is that Jay Bagwell actually gave me a book about small firearms from the 20th century, and this machine gun was in that book. Of course, the MG34, the MG42, and the MG3 were in there. But just in case some people are thinking the MG3 is distinctly different than the MG42, I'm probably going to surprise you all, but the export variant of the MG3 is actually called the MG42/59. And I'll show you all a picture of one right here. And believe it or not, the thing looks a lot like an MG42 because it pretty much is. The MG3 is also largely the same. It's just that it had a very small amount of things improved, at least from what I was reading last night, from one machine gun to the other. And they're largely all the same. The parts are almost completely interchangeable as well, which is very interesting that this machine gun became famous in the Second World War for the kind of firepower it can deliver, and still, nearly 80 to 90 years ahead in the future, these things are still in service with a lot of European armies, and also in Ukraine as well. We're now going to be moving on from that little side note, a very interesting machine gun, and quite honestly, out of the machine guns I've shot, this has to be one of the best ones in terms of how manageable the recoil is, because the rate of fire is really high, and this guy didn't manage it too well in this video, but if you have your hand on the buttstock, you're leaning in and putting some force forward while it's firing, and of course you have a good grip on the thing, it doesn't have that bad of a recoil. There is worse recoil on other machine guns, and I would say this one's actually one of the best. And I would have to honestly say that almost applies to almost all German World War II guns, like the MP40. If you've ever shot an MP40, you know how smooth one of those things are. In fact, it's so smooth, I'd say, if it wasn't for the weight of the thing, it should still be in service today, because it was just that easy, and it just had no recoil, and it was incredibly easy to aim, and it was always accurate, at least from when I shot it. But with that, we're now going to be moving on into our next bit of news in the Northeast, where we saw the survivability of an MRAP tested. The MRAP did not survive this. This was actually a video taken by Russian forces as they fired a anti-tank guided missile at this MRAP in the distance. The anti-tank guided missile will hit the MRAP directly on its side, right under the bottom of the vehicle, blowing it upwards a little bit and of course destroying the suspension system. However, from what we can tell, every single Ukrainian soldier inside of the MRAP survived, and this is what the MRAPs are made for. We can already see the ATGM traveling on its way towards the MRAP in the distance. And we can see the ATGM hit the MRAP, and from that explosion right there, you would think the MRAP's gone. But as you can see, once the initial heat from the explosion dissipates, the MRAP is as cool, literally as a cucumber, and we can see the Ukrainian crew now bailing out of the MRAP. Once again, a testament to the armor of these vehicles and the reason why we sent them over. An MRAP is never supposed to survive a hit itself. The purpose of an MRAP is that the crew will survive the hit. And we now see them firing off a second ATGM because the MRAP still is alive after the crew has abandoned it, and they're now going to try and completely destroy it with an impact right there. We can see a little bit of debris fly off of it this time. I can't really tell you if it survived the second hit or not, but it did survive the first hit well enough that the crew was able to bail out. And it's impressive and incredibly good to know that Ukrainian crew and infantry survivability has been greatly increased due to the introduction of armored cars like the MRAP. With that, we're moving on from that clip in the Northeast and on to one behind the lines where we saw an M109 hit by a Lancet drone. This was also filmed by Russian forces, from what we understand, and it shows a Lancet drone hitting directly into the side of the turret of an M109. I wanted to show this because we largely discredit Russian combat footage, most of the time because it's clearly fake. This, however, seems to be a very authentic video because you can see the clear outline of the M109 right down there. And the Ukrainians, while doing an incredibly good job at defending their country, a year and nearly 2 months on, they are still holding nearly 80% or more of their homeland, which is unbelievable considering they were supposed to be defeated in just a mere 3 days. It's still not an easy job, however, and some Ukrainian soldiers do end up meeting a tough fate. And I wanted to show you all this video because, of course, the war isn't always sunshine and rainbows. It isn't always a perfect time for the Ukrainians. Sometimes unfortunate incidents like these do occur. We can see the M109 moving on out of the tree line and down the dirt road. And we can now see the infrared footage. Well, actually, I'm sorry, that's not infrared. That's just how grayscale the field is. We can see the Lancet flying into the M109. And we can see it coming in and hitting the back of the M109. It appears that the
solid hit.
It appears that the crew member that was on front of the M109 bailed out, but we also see a small fire burning on the back of the M109. But the M109 is continuing on. It appears that the driver and most of the crew may actually be perfectly fine. It's just that the guy on the M109 jumped off, and we don't know if he got back on. It seems as though he may have been left behind in all of the confusion of the explosion. But it looks like, for the large part, rather than the small fire, the Russians did not confirm or show to us that the M109 burned out. So it seems that the Lancet was not able to penetrate the paper-thin armor of the M109's turret, and the M109 may have possibly survived. But you have to give a huge credit to the Ukrainian artillerists, who also risk their lives like this every single day to support the frontline infantry and their attempts to hold back the Russians and prepare for the counteroffensive that'll be coming up in a few weeks' time. With that, we're now moving on from that clip and further down the front to the area of Berestove, which is just north of what we call the Bakhmut front line. In this area, we saw that a counter-battery radar was once again destroyed by Ukrainian forces. This work was done by the 45th Artillery Brigade, which is currently in this area. We can see the counter-battery radar is on and active right now, scanning the area for any kind of disturbances in the air that indicate the direction and distance of the artillery. The 45th, of course, is going to use artillery to destroy the counter-battery radar that's supposed to be finding out where they are. And it appears that the first shot blew the system away.
That's wild. Is it powered like just by a battery or something?
I think it may be. I think it is. It may be a solar-powered battery or something similar where they just set it up and leave it there. But that thing's gone. There's nothing left of it. It's literally just a little mark in the field now. The Russians were sitting there, Ivan, this thing is going to pick up any artillery that fires for about 20 miles around. Oh, it didn't pick that one up, did it? And then the counter-battery radar is just gone. But with that, end of the clip. And of course, huge credit to the 45th Artillery Brigade that for a large part of the Battle of Volodar was helping out the Ukrainian forces with bringing in artillery fire on the advancing Russians, and has now been moved up into the area of Svitlodarsk to now help fight the Russians in that area. We're now going to be moving on into our next clip, where we also saw another T-90M get destroyed today. This was also done by the 45th Artillery Brigade, and also conducted, not by artillery, but by a captured Kornet. Kornets are kind of a Stugna, but they have to be manually guided by an operator that's there with a system. Also, apparently, there's some kind of a corned beef called a Stugna. That's kind of weird. But anyways, here's a Kornet. And you can see a Russian soldier posing right here at an arms expo, or a fake Russian soldier, well, a mannequin actually, that shows how the Kornet system works. Greatly different than the Stugna, because while Stugna operators can be well away from the system and in cover as they operate it, the Kornet operator has to literally sit right under the missile itself and then guide it in from there. It's an incredibly risky system to use, but it is the most advanced ATGM that the Russians have at the moment. And the Ukrainians did capture this thing, and they used it to destroy one of Russia's finest tanks used on the battlefield. Oh, gotta mute it because they're playing the Joker music, where he comes out of the bathroom, he's like a psycho or something. But anyways, they're lining up the Kornet, they fire the Kornet, and the Kornet's on its way.
The Kornet is going to try and find a new host. One that is not near the tube. We can see it hitting the T-90 tank in the distance. A small billow of smoke showing that the union has been made, and the parasite has now attached itself to the destroyed T-90.
The drone is now coming in with what appeared to be Wilson the basketball and dropping a Molotov cocktail on the thing to then burn it on out. We now see them dropping a second Molotov. That one actually made it more so into the hatch. I don't know what it hit right there, but that thing hit something that was not solid. We can now see
a tough time getting out of that one.
Yeah, very tough time for sure. And we can see a very grainy picture that appears to show the tank burned on out a little bit later on in the day. But absolutely incredible to see that they were able to take out a T-90M with something as simple as a cornet. According to the Russians, the T-90M at the beginning of the war was supposed to be invincible. The T-90A already unstoppable. The T-90M completely invincible. But we've seen over 18 of these main battle tanks, including this one, get destroyed over the course of this war from things as simple as a Kornet ATGM, which has been in service since the late 1980s in the Soviet Union. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip, a very nice one to see, as another rare Russian main battle tank has now met its end on the battlefield. Moving on into the area of Bakhmut, we of course have to get into the frontline analysis here first before we actually get into the video evidence itself. And so moving on into this area and looking over the past 24 hours, we can see some interesting changes. So this is the 4th of April, which is the last time that the battlefield map had been updated. Over the course of the 5th of April, the Russians were not able to make any advances in the city whatsoever, and it appeared that Ukrainian defensive positions were holding quite well. However, we did see some events, some very rapid events actually, that have occurred over the past 24 hours that required Deep State UA to modify the map twice over the course of one day. And so moving on to what the battlefield looked like during the halfway point of the day, we can see that once again Russian forces moved forward and closed the gap in the southeastern part of the city, once again trying to get towards, I guess you could say, solidified Ukrainian defensive positions near the railroad tracks in the center of the city. The Russians also created a breakthrough in the area around this reservoir, just to the east of Crimea and in the northern area of the city, that appeared to have been trying to make some kind of a breakthrough or a prong that would reach behind Ukrainian lines and threaten their rear and also their supplies. This was actually expected by us yesterday, that it would have come from the south in this direction near the MiG monument that many people famously know at this point. It appears, however, that the Russians decided that it would be better to use the momentum of coming off of a ridgeline and down onto the Ukrainians to create this, I guess you could say, breach in the Ukrainian lines and get behind them. Over the course of the next 12 hours or so, the Ukrainians were able to push that prong back, but we got a very good idea that Russian forces must be accumulated in the north, a considerable amount for them to try and conduct that prong from that direction, and we may see that they're also building up forces in the south to try at either location to force the Ukrainians out of the town. If the Russians are able to advance onto the T-0504 highway, highlighted in yellow here, the Ukrainians will most likely be cut off from most of their supplies and will have to seriously consider a withdrawal from the town at that point. It is also the same scenario if the Russians push down from the western ridgeline here to the north and then into the area of Crimea. The Ukrainians may also have to retreat from the town because their rear lines may be vulnerable to being encircled and creating a siege where thousands of Ukrainian troops still inside the city may be stuck behind the lines. It appears that the Russians are starting to make the kind of momentum that they thought they would make from the very beginning of the battle at this point, and it may be showing that Ukrainian forces are falling back and redrawing their defensive lines right now, and the Russians are moving throughout the city largely unopposed. That may be why the casualty report was also incredibly low today, as Ukrainian and Russian forces may not be engaging each other as much as they have been over prior days and weeks. And so
Well, it took the Russians long enough. It's been months.
yeah, it's been 6 months, and you know the pro-Russians out there are going, "Oh my God, they're winning! They're blasting away the Ukrainians!" Like the last 6 months didn't exist, where they were being blown away every single day, losing hundreds of guys just in the city alone, and getting hundreds more wounded, and losing hundreds of APCs and hundreds of tanks, and they're finally looking like they're making some kind of progress that the Russian government is probably happy with. But it's really just because the Ukrainians are creating new defensive lines, and we will probably see that once the Russians start engaging these defensive positions near the railway ties and railway tracks, they'll probably become bogged down again, and the battle will last for maybe several more weeks or so until the Ukrainians finally do move out of the town. Of course, the Russians wanted a quick victory when they went into this battle nearly 6 months ago, trying to secure themselves one of the larger towns that was near their front line. We've known that since the start of this battle, that the only kind of significance that this city had is that it was, one, about 3 miles away from the Russian front lines. It was the only town of a reasonable size that was that close. And second, the Ukrainians were perfectly fine with making this a major battle because the terrain was incredibly advantageous. And I think one of the best examples historically of a major battle that went down in history for a town that had absolutely no significance whatsoever would be the Battle of Gettysburg here in the U.S. Civil War. no strategic significance existed in Gettysburg alone. There was nothing special about Gettysburg. If the Confederates had actually captured it, it wouldn't really have changed the situation in the war. Yet the Union decided that it was a pretty good position to fight in, and for some reason the Confederate forces continued to advance. The Army of Northern Virginia, commanded by Robert E. Lee, continued to advance in that direction, although they could have easily just turned around and gone and captured Washington, D.C. and into the war then. We don't know why they made that decision, but still, the Battle of Gettysburg was incredibly important and incredibly beneficial for the Union, much like the Ukrainians find the Battle of Bakhmut, because the terrain was suitable for a defensive. It also was not even at all, like for the Russians, this was a propaganda victory. For the Confederacy at the time of the U.S. Civil War, Gettysburg would have never really served to be a propaganda victory, because a town that size could be found practically anywhere on the border states, for that matter, so there was really no point in them even going there. But I hope that kind of explains in a way and gives a historical precedent as to why this town has really no strategic significance, but both sides have fought over it like it has some kind of significance. That's really the only point, is because of the terrain, and the Ukrainians were able to bleed Russians dry, and it would serve to be a quick propaganda victory for the Russians about 6 months ago if they had been able to take it then. And so with that, we're now going to be moving into the video evidence, where we saw that the 8th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade once again came under fire by Ukrainian soldiers in the area of the northern direction. Of course, this was by the 3rd Armored Brigade, or the 3rd Assault Brigade, which was formerly known as the Azov Brigade, now completely integrated into the Ukrainian Armed Forces. We can hear Curb Your Enthusiasm being played, which we'll have to mute, and we can see a Russian cave right there. Oh, bled, they'll never find me under these tarps surrounded by garbage. Did they just put a rage comic face on this guy? They did.
No,
they did.
They did.
What the hell? So we can now see the Ukrainian drone just looking at the dugout, and we can now see it dropping bomblets inside of it. We can see that that one appears to have gone straight in and exploded, unsettling the roof and most likely taking out the Russians inside. We can now see one of the drones down there that dropped that bomb, and we can also see a Russian moving around inside the dugout, most likely wounded. We now see him just kind of hanging out down there, and it looks like the drone got him for the large part and took him out of the action. Whether he is going to sleep or wounded, he most likely will not be involved in the war any longer. We are now going to be moving on behind the lines to the area of Zalesnyanske. That is so hard to pronounce. You know what, we're going to say Minkiivka, because that's a much easier one to pronounce. In the area of Minkiivka, we saw Ukrainian Uragans conducting a barrage, most likely to support the Ukrainian units either inside of the city or around the flanks. I'm going to have to get the stuttering thing under control, man. I feel like I'm turning into Elmer Fudd over here. But anyways.
Man, it's that coffee, that straight nitro.
It's got to be that straight up nitro, man. I mean, like, I'm running over here like one of those little cars that people convert into ricers that runs on nothing but nitrous. Like, that's almost what I feel like at this point. But with that, here's the clip. And the Chad music. We're going to have to mute that because of the Chad music.
Why'd they have to do that? I love the sound of the rockets.
Yeah, I know. It's such a nice sound, and then they always put the Chad music over it. You know, and the Chad music always accompanies a quote like, "Don't make a nice man angry," or something like that. So then I always have that connotation with it. It's like, come on, just let us hear the audio. But anyways, when you see the Uragans firing off a mass of rockets, most likely around 40 of them, and they're now on their way towards Russian forces. These things are about 220 millimeters in diameter and carry a pretty decent explosive charge per missile, so they'll probably cause a decent amount of damage to Russian forces if they hit them directly. But once again, the spread on MLRSs is wide, and it's most likely meant to blanket a large area instead of trying to hit precisely on Russian forces. We're now going to be moving on further south and into the city itself, and we've gotten several clips today from the city, starting off to the east where we saw that the Wagner house was hit by the HIMARS. Unlike frat houses at colleges, these block parties do not end well, as the HIMARS usually levels the entire block, as we can see in this video. And of course we can hear more music that we have to mute. But we can see a Wagner house over there on fire, being filmed by the Russians, and the Russians are going, "Oh, bliet, Vadim was in there, bliet, and about 500 other guys probably sleeping on top of ammo." But with that, that's the end of the clip, and as we can see, the HIMARS are still being used quite effectively, even within the city itself, to take out Wagner strongpoints like this one. We're now going to be moving on towards the area where the battle is currently going on in the north, where we saw a Ukrainian unit, and I believe it's the ZSU, as it says in the caption, capturing Russian soldiers inside of a heavily destroyed building. Here's the clip.
сюда, блядь. Угоняю, его обгоняй сюда.
Сзади
You can see
потихоньку
what
иди
appears to be a
его.
Russian
А ты
soldier
тут
crawling
где,
with another
тут
one
где?
with his hands up in the background.
Докладывай, что еще двое сдалось.
Сейчас.
Давай, быстрее иди.
And now see the
Вас
Russian
двое
soldier in the back
осталось?
walking forward,
Точно
and the other
двое?
soldier on the floor crawling.
Бля, пацаны, будете пиздеть?
Все, верим. А кто кричал за ВДВ?
Кто кричал за ВДВ?
Десантник где?
Все, давай, ползи.
Давай, ползи.
Тот, кто идет.
You see them still commanding him
Обогнал
forward?
его, блядь. Быстро обогнал.
You see the walking Russian passing the crawling Russian,
Шоу, контент.
Все, Лёх.
and now getting down on the ground.
Так, все,
Well, they're most likely going to tie him up with tape and then move him back to a rear line to be processed and sent to a prisoner of war camp. We can see at the end of the video, the Russian is still crawling, and is most likely still crawling to this very day. With that, that's the end of that clip, and we're now going to be moving on to the next one, where we can see a brave Ukrainian BMP-2 making a stand in the center of the city. From what we understand, this may have been taking yesterday, as this BMP was found and filmed very close to the river, just a few hundred yards away from it, which, still, the defensive lines of the Ukrainian forces in no man's land is just a few hundred yards off the Bakhmut River, but still, it's so close that it must have been filmed the other day. Nonetheless, here's the video of this BMP making a brave stand. It will be hit by a Russian AT weapon, and the crew will abandon it, but it was making quite a stand and causing quite a decent amount of damage from what we could tell before it was hit. We can see that the drone operator is actually so close to where this drone is that you can hear the BMP firing outside.
Ой, як дивись, да, головне?
We can see the BMP at the bottom of the screen right there firing at the Russians and giving vital infantry support. The BMP is now standing by and looking for another target. We can see what appears to be a large smoke screen, most likely a phosphorus shell that has been fired into the area to cover the Russians' advance across the river. The BMP is still standing by and waiting for more targets, but it appears that none have presented itself. We also do not know how close Ukrainian infantry are in the vicinity of this BMP to support it. We can now see the BMP firing further down the street in the direction where the mouse cursor is, as it may have seen a Russian squad trying to move across the street. We can see the BMP continuing to unload further down the street at the Russian forces. And we can now see the Ukrainian BMP turning around to retreat off the field. The BMP has now stopped and was hit on the front.
Блядь.
From where the hit was based, it appears that the hit most likely was absorbed in the engine bay, but caused critical damage to the engine, which will most likely lead it to it seizing up and then the crew abandoning it after maybe a couple of yards.
Бэку попали.
We can see that the tank, well, the BMP more so, is not really advancing at its top speed. And in fact,
Не знаю,
it's kind of just creeping on. It appears that the engine is most likely going to seize up soon.
Куда попали?
бачину.
Блядь, она пустая.
We can now see the BMP has run out of steam. The engine did seize up right there, and it now looks like the crew is going to abandon the vehicle.
Стали. Хай вилазять без...
О, приблизь.
We can see smoke coming off the engine, certainly showing that it's overheated or
І
seized
по
or
прямой
both.
до мене ми їх стрітим, по прямой до мене.
And we can now see the commander
Я
and
їх
gunner,
стрічу
as
там.
well as the
Скажіть,
driver
до
bailing
мене
out of the
прям-
vehicle.
По дороге прямо хай бегут.
Все, на пульт я їх зустрічаю.
Давай.
Давай, я їх зустрічаю.
Давай. На. Веди сюда.
Ти що скоординуйте мене?
Плюс. Я снял.
That's the end of the clip. But you have to say that that BMP crew did their utmost and stayed there so long that they put their own BMP in danger of being hit and taken out. Luckily, that Ukrainian crew was able to survive, as most of the hit was absorbed by the engine itself, which did lead to the BMP being abandoned and practically destroyed on the battlefield, but at least the crew was able to survive to fight another day, and hopefully even get a Western APC once those start to enter the battlefield, much like a Bradley, or maybe even, let me think of some of the others, a Martyr, which is in some ways better than a BMP, but in other ways very similar. We're now going to be moving on from that little video clip showing the Ukrainians' brave stand with that BMP, and now on behind the city and behind the lines, more so towards the MiG monument that we were talking about a little while ago, where we saw some Georgian volunteers in the city celebrating one of the soldiers' birthdays. Of course, in the middle of all of these brave, heroic stands that the Ukrainians are making in the city to hold the line, there are fun, festive times, like just having a birthday, like this guy's having right here. And also, I like the 101st Airborne patch he has right there. But you can see them lighting up some
I thought he was
sparkles.
lighting up like a stick of like cartoon TNT or something for a minute.
Dude, they're gonna start playing hot potato with it. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. They're gonna be like, wait, no, take it. But also, I like how that looks like a lemon or like a grapefruit or something that they've stuck these candles into.
Oh goodness.
Dude, why in the world does it look like he's holding a cartoon hand grenade with like it's a
Yeah,
orange?
man, I wouldn't be
hand-
holding that.
Dude, that thing's about to blow up, and his face is gonna be covered in soot like in the cartoons. But still, it's great to know that the Georgian Legion does take a break from the fighting every once in a while to do small, nice things like this, like to put some candles in a little fruit and celebrate someone's birthday, because it's the small things that matter in a war like this to keep up morale. And I'm sure that this is going to keep up this guy's morale and keep him in the fight for even longer. We're now going to be moving on from that nice little clip from the city of Bakhmut and back into the seriousness of the battle, because of course we saw another Ukrainian convoy racing their way down the T-0504 highway with Russians just a mile away, of course a perimeter being secured by Ukrainian barrier forces in this area, but they still have to race at incredible speed into the city. And so, here's the video. We can see that this car is driving down this hardly existent road at this point at around 80 to 90 miles an hour, and when you see the traffic coming out of the city going at about the same speed. This thing is booking it.
I would say.
They're about to come down to the Bailey Bridge that has been placed over one of the destroyed bridges heading into Bakhmut, which means they'll have to slow down. From what we can understand, this is one of the most dangerous parts of the highway, as slowing down is almost certain death, and the Russians have anti-tank guided missiles honed into this area a pretty decent amount of the time. And that's why you'll see that several vehicles have been destroyed just right in front of the Bailey Bridge, like these three right here.
Man, this is like a good example of driving into downtown Birmingham on the interstate with this road and speed and everything.
Yeah, I know, right? This is like on 280. But anyways, and that's the end of the video, and you've got to say, these units and these supply trucks that continue to race down these highways to keep the garrison inside of that city right there alive are doing an incredibly dangerous job, as the wreckage of the vehicles just in front of the bridge is proof of the danger that is prevalent on this highway, and yet they still persevere each and every single day, hour by hour, to bring in ammunition, food, and other vital equipment to keep those Ukrainian forces going and to keep the battle on. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that clip on the T-0504 highway and on into the forested areas near the perimeter that the Ukrainians have made just a mile south of the highway, where we saw Russian forces hit by Da Vinci. That's right, Leonardo da Vinci came out of the grave and pimp-slapped some Russians. So let's watch him do it in real time. We can see a Russian squad advancing through the forested area. Of course, the foliage and the leaves have not returned yet, and so it's very easy to see them in their advance. We can see artillery shell hit near the rear, and it appears that one Russian did take a nap. We can now see them firing on the rest of the Russian positions on this plateau, just a little ways from Klishkivka, and it appears that they're pinning Russians down and also, I guess you could say, sending Russians away. We can see one shell take out two of them. And we can see some small AGS fire hitting the trench as well. We can now see a Russian trash pit about to be hit and cleaned up by Ukrainian forces. Of course, Ukrainians are always caring for the environment and making sure to take care of trash in the most ecological of circumstances. We can now see a Russian climbing through a window just to be blown away in the blast a second later. We can now see Ukrainian artillery once again hitting the compounds that the Russians are hiding in, and the tree lines where the Russians are advancing further up. We can also see them hitting some of the roads that we can tell are heavily traveled, and the trenches as well. What's also very interesting about this is that while the Russians have been here, they've made a very extensive trench work, and it appears that the Russians are finally learning that trenches dug in perfectly straight lines are not smart. It took them a whole year and a month for us to finally see these kinds of trenches that have zigzags in them being made throughout the entirety of the front lines. Gotta tell you, if the Russians are that slow of a learner, they'll never learn anything over the course of this war. They'll enter the next one if they ever fight another one, probably using the same tactics that they're using right now that are already around 70 to 80 years old.
They never learn because the ones that actually do figure out what went wrong the first time, they end up getting killed, and then the new guys that come in have to learn it all over again, and that cycle repeats over and over.
It's like Groundhog Day, but not with
Exactly.
groundhogs, with Russians. And so that...
Oh, yes. Bliat.
Oh, yes, Bliat. We have to learn how to dig trench. I say I worked in laying pipe. Oh, that sounded wrong. I worked in pipeline.
Yeah, I
and
know
I say, I say we dig a straight trench through this plateau.
Anyways, we're moving on to Klishkiivka, where we saw an ammo cache catch on fire. And we can also hear a ukulele in the lo-fi hip-hop that you hear in a really posh coffee shop. We can now see the artillery...
Lady.
You had very bad lag right there. I don't even know what you said. It went ukulele, and I was like, oh no. I was like, hopefully our internet isn't dying. But we see right here, the artillery is consistently landing on this one spot. We can see a little bit of movement in the tree line, and we can now see it apparently hit something that did explode, but it appears that there's no subsequent fire, so whatever it hit blew up pretty quickly. You now see the smoke dissipating, and we can see what appears to maybe be a Russian moving around the tree line or a little bit of garbage. Oh, wait a minute, we got a couple of them. Oh, they're going. They're making a run for it. They're going on the 30K marathon. And so with that, that's the end of the clip. But very nice to see, and it's always interesting to know that apparently the Ukrainians also have a unit emblem that incorporates an Angry Bird into it. I know that the Angry Birds lawyers are already firing up the jet, and they're on their way to Ukraine to give a cease and desist to this unit, because no Angry Bird shall ever be defamed by being, by literally being used to wipe away real-life orcs. So with that, we're going to be moving on from that. You know, that's kind of ironic, Matthew, that they are using an Angry Bird, and I thought the whole game of Angry Birds was to take out the orcs. You know, like the little green orc things in the game. And now the Ukrainians have made a
yeah, that's
symbol
right.
of
They
it.
had the green pigs in the game, and you shot the bird and knocked down like the building blocks to take them out.
Yeah. This
Yeah, I
is
forgot
great.
all about that.
This is great brand advertising for them, actually, considering that this is almost the same thing, but real life. I mean, hell, they really needed to pair up with some Ukrainian units and have them sponsored by Angry Birds. You know, I think that would be great. Like they go, get ready to fire, round, hanging. This round is sponsored by Angry Birds, you know, and then they fire it. But anyways, we're moving on from Klishkiivka. Nice to see that they were able to hit that small ammo cache, most likely being used to supply the forces up here fighting with the Ukrainians to try and push their perimeter back towards the highway. And with that, we're going to be moving even further back as we saw more Ukrainian APCs rolling in to take the race down the highway on into the city to continue to help the garrison that's defending the town. And so with that, here's the video. Some more lo-fi hip-hop.
Lo-fi.
Yes, I like a cappuccino, well stirred with a taste of hops in it.
Sir, this is McDonald's? What the hell do you mean? Well, you got this music playing. I thought it was really nice. But anyways, you see this guy looking at the camera and talking to it. I don't know, unfortunately, what he's saying because we have it muted, but we can see a Ukrainian unit rolling on by in the film. Some pretty nice armored cars, as a matter of fact. That's the end of the clip, but once again showing that the Ukrainians are not giving up Bakhmut without a fight, and even still, they're making sure that while Ukrainian forces are having a pretty tough time right now, from what we can tell, of course, they're redrawing their lines to defend the city as it is right now, they are not going to give it up until every single last Russian they can gets a nice snap without the Ukrainians having to leave the city entirely. We're now going to be moving on from that video clip and on out of the Bakhmut front line as a whole, as those are all the video clips and evidence we have today of how the battle is progressing. Of course, we see that the flashpoints are the ones we expect. A little bit of activity in the northern area, most likely towards Avdiivka. The Russians are once again trying to attack and push the perimeter towards Ivanivsky, the Ukrainians firing artillery on them to make sure that that perimeter does not move, and of course, typical fighting occurring within the city as the Russians try and attack from all directions to push the Ukrainians out. We're now going to be moving on out of that area and further south and in the rear line, where we saw life in a frontline hospital, of course reported on by United 24, which makes incredible videos, by the way, and that's why we show them, because they are unbelievable in their quality and their, I guess you could say, cinematography or filmography. They're incredible. And so with that, here's the clip.
This is Lugansk region area of Bakhmut, 8-7 kilometers from the front line. Here, armored vehicles bring wounded soldiers from the front line because no ambulance can go that deep. Otherwise, it's going to be destroyed immediately.
Near the village of Belogorivka, among havoc and desolation, Ukrainian combat medics established a field hospital called a stabilization point, as close to the front line as possible to reduce evacuation time. Here we meet Jeanette, a Norwegian volunteer and mother of 4 children. She personally visits field hospitals and frontline cities to estimate the demand for medical supplies, equipment and armored vehicles.
When I go to the hospitals, I go to the field hospital, there are a lot of bombing, there are destruction. There are field hospitals that is get bombed, so they need more. And the equipment that they use, it's ruined. And a lot of the cars we are providing, they will last for a couple of weeks, maybe months, and then they also get bombed. So we need to keep donating and keep giving.
Combat medics fight along other soldiers and make everything possible to keep the vitals until evacuation arrives. The intensity of fire is so tremendous that expensive heavily armored vehicles are just disposable here.
Sanya, you're a hero. Hold on, everything will be great. Everything is set up so that we can provide high-quality medical help. It takes about 15 minutes to bring a soldier here, if you can take the person straight away from the battlefield. Sometimes there are situations when we can't get the person out for hours.
To get into war zone with the chances to come back, medics use donated M113 British armored vehicles and Ukrainian-owned produced Kozak 2. But even these juggernauts get destroyed at the rate of 2 per week. Once the wounded are brought to stabilization point, the race for survival is on.
They bring the stretchers in with this big lump on them from blood, flesh, and so on and so on. We immediately cut off all the clothes and identify the injuries straight away. We put a cannula into the vein and give the necessary anesthesia so that the surgeons can start working. There are different types of injuries, like bullet wounds and shrapnel injuries. There are also injuries from contusions, acute traumas and closed craniocerebral injuries and others, all varying severity. The most serious injuries are those to the head, chest, abdomen, yet serious injuries to the upper and lower limbs also happen.
Having to deal with the deaths of brothers and sisters in arms daily, the Ukrainian medics have to attend to unwanted patients as well.
Recently, we've had loads of Wagner fighters, convicts, interesting personalities, one might say. They're all covered in tattoos, often with fascist symbols, and they've ironically come here to fight fascism. This is Ahmed. He used to be Kadyrov's fighter, now he wears Ukrainian colors.
Unfortunately, Even the effectively organized logistics is not always enough to save the life of the critically wounded soldier. Field hospitals are supposed to be protected by Geneva Conventions, but being there is not just dangerous. Unfortunately, it's often a matter of time before they are deliberately targeted by the Russian army.
Every day we suffer losses. There's a lot of mass missile strikes against Ukraine. Yesterday we found out that they destroyed a hospital in the area near Bakhmut, and all the army medics there were killed. Unfortunately, we are all at war.
Combat medics more than anybody else face the brutality and immense amount of pain brought by war. And yet they keep saving lives daily, sacrificing their own.
When I go to the vanguard, I take off any signs that show I'm a medic, all crosses and all chevrons, because medics are the primary target for Russian snipers. They're literally hunting down medics. It's the same thing with medical transportation vehicles. We try not to put any signs on them too, no red crosses, because they will be the first target. Usually this is all prohibited by international conventions. But we all know who we're really dealing with.
Man, these combat surgeons, they've got a tough job.
I know. I mean, like, it's an incredibly tough job. It's unbelievably tough, really. And these guys, they come under fire a little bit, not as much as the frontline troops, but man, you know their job has to be stressful. And you know it's got to be traumatizing as well, especially when guys come in that are just too far gone to help, because that does happen. And, you know, throughout a lot of history, a lot of these frontline medical stations like these, sometimes the stories you hear from them are worse than what you will hear at the front lines about what people come in with. In the First World War, there were stories of these medical stations like these where a soldier would come in and he would have his arms over his, pretty much his torso, and the doctor would say, okay, remove your arms, and as he removed them, he was pretty much pushing his intestines back into his body as he ran back to the medical station, and they were just hanging out of his body, and he pushed them back in. You know, horrifying stuff like that, and these guys are having to deal with things like that all the time. Not just of Ukrainian soldiers, but whenever they capture wounded Russian soldiers, they send those back to the medical stations as well. They're doing a vital job, an incredibly important job in keeping Ukrainian soldiers alive and as many people as they can, even not just Ukrainians, but Russian soldiers as well. And they deserve as much praise as everyone else in this war for doing their own special yet very important part of the war effort. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on, of course, having learned a good bit more about how those frontline medical stations work. And with that, we're moving on into the wine glass. And in Avdiivka today, we saw that some close firefights occurred within the town, and some Ukrainian soldiers were able to throw off some fairly accurate grenades on the Russian forces that had made their way into the perimeter. You can see that right here as the copyrighted music plays. We can see a Ukrainian soldier right here explaining what had been going on in the city. And we can see the Ukrainian soldier talking about the engagement. And here in a second, they'll actually show what he's talking about. Now, Matthew, I saw you actually bring down the axe on someone, but I'm going to take the axe back off of him real quick. So that way I can sit there and correct that in a second. But we can see them throwing the precise grenade onto the Russians, and it appears to have been an incredibly effective one, at least from drone footage. We can also see them surrendering right there at the end of the clip. And so with that, that's the video of what had happened inside the city of Avdiivka today. The only one of the few video clips we've gotten from this major battle occurring in the area. And real quick, I actually saw someone, and we're going to call him out, that actually went on a whole rant, and I'm about to have to sadly prove him wrong. I hate to do it, but I think it's time, Matthew, to call him out. There was a view.
Facts don't care about your feelings.
Yes, I'm gonna have to correct you. Thanks. But anyway, but anyways, this person whose name is CM sat there and said, "You see, oh my God, the enforcer, he supports the communist Chinese because he called Taiwan the Republic of China." I don't know if, like, and I don't mean to be rude, but I don't know if you understand Chinese history at all, because the communist Chinese are called the People's Republic of China, and Taiwan is called the Republic of China. Like, if you pull up the official name of Taiwan, you'll see it's called the Republic of China. And if I pull this up, watch, Republic of China. Wait, hang on. It even showed it better. Right there. And right here, Taiwan.gov. Welcome to the official portal website of the Republic of China, Taiwan. I don't even know where in the world you're coming from saying I support the communist Chinese, considering I called them by their official name that they're recognized by in the United Nations. I don't even know. Like, I hate to say it, you might have to read up on history a little bit better, because it's not Taiwan, it's called the Republic of China. Taiwan's just the quick little easy name we gave the Republic of China. But, man, you know, Matthew, though, I don't want to sound like a butthole, though, because, you know, I know this guy is right. He's going to be right until he drops dead, most likely, but I swear, the last time I saw this, it was called the Republic of China. Like, for example, right here, the government of the Republic of China, right here, I'll click on it, and you'll see there's the seal of the Taiwanese government. You can also see that they were evacuated Taipei in 1949, 73 years ago, which is the capital of Taiwan to this day. If that's not good enough, I don't know what is. But I support Taiwan in this situation right now with the given environment that we have. And of course, the Chinese are openly hostile to the United States, so it would make no sense to sit there and support communist Chinese interests, considering that's not in America's interests. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that quick aside. I know that was a little bit of a break from the Ukraine war news, but I saw that and I was like, what? I don't know. I don't know why people feel like they're so strong in their ignorance. Maybe breed up a little bit or something. But anyways, we're moving on out of Avdiivka, and it looks like we destroyed that guy with facts and logic. Yes, thanks. And we're now
much.
Homeschool much. But we're now going to be moving on to this clip of a kamikaze drone hitting an anti-aircraft MTLB. And so here's the clip.
Sounds so weird watching these videos without any sound.
Yeah, you
like
know,
you just want to start making sound effects like.
I'm expecting some Chad music, you know. I'm gonna make you pump like that, you know, something like that. But no music. It's just the kamikaze drone. But you can see the MTLB firing off its AA gun right there. And as the kamikaze drone comes in, we're gonna get a good look at it. So it is an MTLB, and it has a 23mm gush gun on the back of it. And I think that the MTLB is about to start gushing fire, and not fire at the Ukrainians, but fire right out of the vehicle. We can now see it hit and explode. And that most likely took out the crew on the AA gun mounted on top of the MTLB, but it appears that no ammunition fire or fire in the vehicle has begun, so it may actually have remained intact for the most part, but the important parts of the crew were taken out. With that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip and on into our next one, further down the line, where we saw in the Marinka area some Russians inside their trenches being hit by some bomblets. And so, here's the clip. When you see the Ukrainians looking down at the Russians, figuratively and literally, as they sit inside of their trench, and we're just waiting for the round to come in. We hear an explosion in the distance. And we can actually see the round explode right on the trench. We could actually hear it outside as well. And you see that one of the Russians appears to be wounded. And it appears that the second one may also be wounded here as well, although we really can't tell on that one. That's seen in the clip, but a fairly effective strike in the Marinka area on some Russian forces in their trenches, most likely on one of the flanks of the town. We're now going to be moving on from this clip and on down into the southern front. We didn't get a lot of news from the southern front today. In fact, we got no news from Volodar, and it appears that that offensive has completely died at this point. The Russians are no longer pursuing it due to massive losses in the fields outside of the town. But moving on behind the lines towards Zolota Niva, we saw that a Ukrainian army soldier used his scissors to save a hedgehog from suffocation after it walked into some tape and gotten stuck in it. So here's the clip. We can hear that wholesome Keanu Reeves Big Chungus music playing as they take out the knife and they're trying to save the hedgehog. I've never held a hedgehog, so I don't know how prickly these things are. But I remember seeing like 2 of them in Britain, and that was pretty cool. But we can now see that they've gotten the tape off of the hedgehog, very carefully trying to get it off, not to hurt the hedgehog any further. And now picking it up. And you see him holding the hedgehog like a bowling ball. And it largely is just a living bowling ball with some like prickly spikes on it. But nice to see that they took the effort to take care of the thing and get the tape off of it. Well, that we're moving on from that clip and on into the next one towards Avdiivka, where we saw a drive-by shooting. Now, Matthew, what was that meme, Matthew? You know, the one I was talking about a little bit earlier today that I wasn't able to remember. It was something about whip the block and win the Glock or something like that.
I think it was run the block and something.
Run the block and win this Glock or something like that. But we can see that a captured Russian BTR, now being used by the Ukrainians, is running the block to win the Glock. Quite literally, and here's the video. We can see it driving by on the front lines as a firefight's going on.
Oh, spin the block.
Spin the block, win the Glock. That's what it was. But we can see this thing spinning the block, and I'm certain this thing will also be winning the Glock. I don't really know. I don't know. I'm not really a big fan of Glocks, me personally. More so a fan of revolvers. But that's my personal preference. You know, it's the gun world. Everyone's into whatever. But I'm a big fan of revolvers, me personally. Anyways, looks like they were spinning the block quite nicely. With that, that's all of the news we got from the Southern Front today. It appears that there were no frontline advances to speak of. The front line is staying status quo, and we're now going to be moving on out of the area of the Southern Front and on into the area of Kherson, where we could see that some Ukrainian drones were operating in the Kherson area, and it looks like they were causing some damage to Russian forces. We can hear some bass guitar playing, setting the mood, as the Russians are probably about to pull off a big goof. You can see them near this green-roofed building. And we can also see one of them going for a schwim. We know that that's not going to end well. Actually, it looks like he's getting water. He used river water. Ew, dude, imagine how much industrial waste is in that water. Oh my god, dude.
You just drink it straight from the river?
They're just drinking it raw from the river. This guy's going to die of dysentery. His guts are schlicked with oil and other kinds of industrial waste. Ew! Anyways, we see the Ukrainians setting up some kind of an explosive right there, and now the drones are on their way. We can actually see them flying over the damaged and destroyed Antonovsky Bridge that crosses the Dnieper River near Kherson and towards the Russian positions right on the other side. They're now dropping this massive explosive onto the Russians on the greenhouse roof, and it appears that they blew away about a quarter of the building. We now see the drone once again flying over there again, another bomblet being dropped on top of it. And we can now see that a fire is broken out inside of the small house. The fire continues to burn. It looks like it's going to consume the entire building and most likely all of the supplies that are found within it. We can now see some more Russians out here wandering around near what appears to be a green-roofed barn. There is apparently some kind of a pattern here with Russians picking green-roofed buildings. We can now see them hitting that one with an artillery shell, and it appears that pieces of it have gone flying up into the air. We can now see that at night. And in full color. We can now see it burning, and it looks like that building was also knocked out as well. With that, that's the end of the clip. But once again, a huge credit to the Ukrainian operators who were in that area near the Kherson River and once again conducting attacks on the Russians. And while their forces have been heavily depleted on both sides because there is no viable offensive that can be launched from the Kherson direction any longer due to the width and the infeasibility of fording the Dnieper River, they still are harassing each other, and it appears that the Ukrainians currently do have the upper hand in terms of the losses they're inflicting on the Russians in this area. We're now going to be moving on up into Kyiv, because we have covered all of the news for today, from north to south, east to west, in Ukraine, and out of Ukraine. And so, without further ado, here's the speech from the one, the only, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. And so, without further ado, here's the speech. Speech!
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Сьогодні увесь день вже в Україні, в Києві, тут, на Банковій. день внутрішніх нарад та підготовки до заходів, які заплановані на найближчі тижні. Провів нараду з главою уряду, Шмигалем, більш щодо поточних питань, координація державних кроків, рішень. Нарада щодо безпекової ситуації, роботи правоохоронних органів, наш міжнародний порядок денний, підготовка зустрічей, переговорів, звернень. Як і завжди, був на зв'язку з військовими. Усе, що стосується найгарячіших точок передової. Дуже важливо, що зміст візиту в Польщу, робота нашої делегації у Варшаві та у постійній комунікації з польськими партнерами мають бути відчутними для нашого фронту. Оборона і захист наших людей, підтримка нашої стійкості, передусім воїнів – це питання номер один на усіх переговорах і зустрічах. Саме оборона, зброя для України, боєприпаси для України, нові оборонні системи для України. Я дякую Польщі, дякую нашим партнерам за те, що цей візит став дійсно змістовним. Окремо хочу відзначити зустріч, яка відбулася вже дуже пізно ввечері, вчора майже вночі. Зустріч із мерами польських міст-рятівників для України і українців – Жешув, Перемишль, Люблін і Хелм. Зустрілись ми з ними саме у Хелмі, разом з паном прем'єр-міністром Польщі Моравецьким. Я подякував усій громаді міст-рятівників, кожному і кожній, хто допомагав українцям, хто реально довів у перші ж дні повномасштабної війни, що між українськими і польськими серцями немає жодних бар'єрів, кордонів, перепонів. Україна вміє бути вдячною. Вдячною за таку солідарність, історичну солідарність. Сьогодні, як і завжди, є наші підрозділи, які варто відзначити. Десантники, 80-ки та бійці 57-ї окремої мотопіхотної бригади. 30-та окрема механізована бригада. Міцність вашого захисту, хлопці, і стійкість – все це надихає потужно, надихає світ не збавляти обертів у підтримці України. Дякую вам, воїни. 35-та і 36-та окремі бригади морської піхоти, воїни 55-ї окремої артилерійської бригади Запорізька Січ. Незмінно молодці, незмінно прагнуть більшого результату. Дякую. Дякую підрозділу спеціального призначення першого головного центру ГУР, які воюють в Бахмуті. Молодці хлопці. Бахмут і Мар'їнка, Авдіївка, весь наш Донбас, наш Схід, Запоріжжя, наше Приазов'я, наша Херсонщина. Я дякую всім, хто б'ється за свободу для нашої країни, за свободу для наших людей. Дякую всім, хто неодмінно вижене російську армію з України. Слава нашим воїнам, слава Україні!
And with that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, and that wraps up our news summary for the day. I thank every single one of y'all so much for watching this news, and I'm glad to know that so many people find this to be a credible source of news on the war in Ukraine. If y'all did enjoy, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe as we run this stream 6 days a week. Except for Monday. We take a break off on Monday, but every single night you can always count on us to be here covering this news of the war over the past 24 hours at 10 p.m. Eastern Time every single night without fail, unless the internet dies. That's one thing we will say, is that if the internet dies, there's no chance we can even get on here and do it. And that's very rare. Usually we can get on here for at least a good while and cover most of the news, and then it goes out, or we're in the question segment and then it dies, but nonetheless, make sure to subscribe, because we are always here, and we're always covering the news. And so with that, thank you all once again for watching. We're about to be moving into our question segment. We're going to address all of the polls that we've run in between the last question segment and this one. We're also going to be addressing all of the questions as many as we can, of course, all of the super chats, and as many live chats as possible. I would like to make a note, just in case we do have new viewers, that you do not have to throw in a super chat to have your question answered. Throwing in a super chat more so just shows appreciation for the channel, and of course helps us to keep the thing running, because we don't run ads or have sponsors. We only take super chats. And of course, if you do enjoy this channel and you want to of course keep it running, you can decide yourself how much you find this channel to be worth to yourself. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on to the polls. And what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so for our final question segment, we have 5 polls to address. We have an extra one tonight because the enforcer wanted me to run a different poll, which actually turned out to have some pretty interesting results. And the question was, Is China attempting to start a war or create diplomatic leverage? 53% agreed with the enforcer and said it is only for diplomatic leverage. 38% said they want a war with Taiwan, and 8% said unsure. And I have to say that I'm going to double down my position. I do believe that they're trying to start a war with Taiwan, and China's been eyeing Taiwan just like Russia eyed Ukraine. Russia went and took the bait. They went for it, and it backfired on them. And I think China might have a different situation because they have a little bit of a stronger military than Russia had to begin with. So, very precarious situation, and we shouldn't underestimate it. And I know I say that constantly about China, but they are one of our biggest political and also military adversaries at this point. And Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I'm going to still stick to my guns. That it's most likely to create some kind of a diplomatic play, because the Chinese probably do not want to risk the same thing that the Russians did, which is greatly overestimating the ease that they can complete something and then having massive economic, I guess you could say, fallout from a decision to go to war, and also using a lot of it in an attempt to invade Taiwan. From what we understand, the Taiwanese have actually developed their doctrine entirely for fighting a Chinese naval invasion, with a massive amount of surface-to-air missiles, anti-ship missiles, and also a pretty considerable submarine fleet for a nation with a navy of its size. They most likely would be able to give the Chinese a run for their money if they ever attempted to try and conduct an air war campaign to weaken the Taiwanese and then a subsequent naval invasion to try and take the island. It would most likely be very costly for the Chinese, and while they may be able to accomplish it, the Taiwanese also have plans to destroy practically their entire industrial sector in the meantime, to make sure that the Chinese really get nothing out of it, rather than a weakened military, a weakened economy, and also a completely useless island in terms of its economic benefit to the country, and it'll be nothing more than a monetary sink for the Chinese to pump money into to try and rebuild worse off than it was before. So I would have to say, for all of those reasons, I do still think it is a diplomatic play, and similar situations like these where ships have been searched at sea and stopped have been seen before throughout history, and most of the time, if not all of the time, they've been used as diplomatic plays and not necessarily the prelude to war. And so with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well once again, and with that, we are on to the next one, but an interesting poll nonetheless, and I'd still like to say, while I do stick to my guns and have my own opinions on these things, doesn't mean anyone else's opinion is wrong. They could be doing this to go to war. It's just that I believe they're doing it as a diplomatic play. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our second poll says a Japanese Blackhawk crashed into the ocean near Taiwan, and the cause is still unknown. And what are your thoughts? 35% said that's weird timing and very suspicious. 35% also said that's nothing suspicious and just an accident. 15% said many Blackhawks are crashing, which is odd, and 15% said unsure. Now, the Blackhawks have been in service for some time, but we have seen quite a few crash in the last few months. One crashed in Huntsville, one's now crashed in the ocean near Taiwan, and another one crashed somewhere else. I can't remember where it was. In Kentucky. So, unless Blackhawks suddenly started getting loose screws or something, or some unforeseen problem just popped up out of the blue, seems kind of odd to me, so I would probably rule that one out. With everything going on with Taiwan and China, it seems a little suspicious to me that a Blackhawk has gone down. Now, that would be a huge, huge move for China to have done something to bring it down with 10 soldiers on board. That would certainly be an act of war. And the fact they don't really know what caused it yet kind of makes me believe maybe it wasn't China, but I'm not really sure at this point. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say it was most likely not the Chinese, considering that we have a record of multiple incidents with Blackhawks recently. It may be that the Blackhawk had some kind of a failure and then crashed into the sea. That may be the case, but it is very weird to hear that so many Blackhawks are going down with such a, I guess you could say, repeated frequency. And they're happening all over the world. One happened in Alabama, one happened in Kentucky, now one's happened just off Taiwan. Very interesting to say, but I don't really know if that would be the Chinese or not, because that would be a very brazen move from the Chinese to really not be in any tense standoff with the Japanese at the moment, and then immediately shoot down a Black Hawk. That would be a 0 to 100 escalation in terms of how things go in the world. But with that, I hope that does address the poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the third poll says today, Macron, the president of France, meets with Xi Jinping to discuss trade in China, and Airbus just opened a new facility that they announced today in China. And what are your thoughts? 42% said France is selling out. 8% said unsure, 20% said I'm mixed on it, and 30% said France is practicing diplomacy only. And I have to admit, it seems like France is somewhat selling out. And that's kind of harsh criticism on them. But for Macron to be meeting with Xi to discuss opening trade, and also a French company, Airbus, going in and opening a new facility in China in the midst of what they're basically promoting in Ukraine with Russia, they've sided with Russia at this point, seems like they're kind of going against the interest of the NATO alliance, which is counterintuitive. So I'm not really a big fan of that, and they should probably rethink those decisions. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'm not necessarily a big fan of that. I actually saw someone say it's not selling out. I would say it is selling out, because we're saying that and you know, of course, we can't really get into it as much as we want on this channel, because of course we're on YouTube, and YouTube doesn't really like people talking negatively about the Chinese. But with what China does to their own people, and also what they're doing on the world stage, almost aligning themselves with the Russians at this point in every single form and shape, it would make no sense for the French to go over there and not only try and open up trade, but already plan on moving major aviation industries and companies like Airbus into China and having their manufacturing done there seems senseless. I don't see the point in it, and I think that honestly is selling out, especially considering that the Chinese have openly become rival of the West, not just the United States, but the Western world as a whole, and are actively planning on usurping their power and prowess. It makes no sense for a Western country to decide, yes, these would be the kind of people I want to send my industries from France, the United States, and the rest of the world on into China. I don't really like the idea of that. I would not back that up. And you know, I'm actually seeing some people in here. Oh, that was just a Russian bot. But I'm actually seeing a few people in here that are going, well, you know, it's not really selling out. Tell me, with the Chinese doing what they're doing to Taiwan, are we going to say that it's not really selling out to support the Chinese with our business while they sit there and threaten one of our allies in the region? I would say that is selling out. And I would say that's certainly not a good thing to do. I would say that, and also I saw someone, this is actually a good one from Jorn Schneider. He said good cop, bad cop. But the Chinese only have nothing to lose from this and everything to gain from it. They're gaining more business, they're gaining more money, and there is really no good cop or bad cop in a diplomatic situation like this, where we're trying to leverage economic weight over the Chinese, because if the United States is saying, they're now our rival and we're not really going to do a lot of business with them, and then the French go, well, we're going to do business with them anyways. It's not really good cop or bad cop. They're mitigating the kind of stance the U.S. is taking and making it not as serious as it is, and therefore not forcing the Chinese to do anything they don't want to do, at least in terms of diplomacy. So I would say,
what a short-sighted. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, you can go ahead.
I was about to say, what a short-sighted decision by France, and also Airbus, which is headquartered in France, by the way. I saw some folks saying it's a European company. They do operate in Europe. They operate in many countries. Yes, but it is headquartered in France. I would say it's very short-sighted, because the moment China decides to do something or move on Taiwan, or they soil their relationships with NATO completely, that investment's going to go down the tubes completely. All that trade or anything that France is negotiating right now is also going to go down the tubes. And it's a real possibility that they might turn and, you know, do something stupid with Taiwan very soon.
And that's certainly true. And we actually found the Airbus headquarters. It's in pretty much like a suburb of Toulouse called, and hopefully I'm saying this correctly, Blagnac. I'm hoping that it's not Blagnac, because then people are gonna be like, "You idiot! It's Blagnac or whatever." Anyways, this is this appears to be the actual Airbus headquarters right over here. And you can see that they have plenty of aircraft out here being fulfilled on orders. Makes no sense to move this to China. There's also a Airbus facility that produces parts for the Airbus company here in Alabama, and that would make no sense for them to start moving their business to China. That is definitely anti-Western, and that is certainly helping to bolster the Chinese economy and allow them to continue on with their Silk Road project in trying to create a sphere of influence around the Indian Ocean. It's not smart at all, and I don't like the idea of it, in my honest opinion. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next poll says, NATO's Stoltenberg says he is confident that Sweden will be admitted to NATO. And what are your thoughts? 62%, the most popular option, said yes, Sweden will be in NATO shortly. 23% said Stoltenberg must have new info that we don't have, 7% said unsure, and 8% said there is no indication of that. And publicly, I've seen nothing change over the last couple of weeks with Sweden. So Stoltenberg must know something that we don't, or he's either just trying to hype it up in the hopes that that'll push Turkey to get over their political or personal grievances with Sweden and think about the strength of the alliance instead of their own personal feelings. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, at least of what we know at the moment publicly, it doesn't seem that Sweden will be in NATO soon because Turkey still does not like them much, and they're the ones holding them back. But maybe Stoltenberg does know information. Maybe there has been some kind of an agreement made with the Turks that they will allow Sweden in. So I'll say maybe Stoltenberg knows something we don't know, because given the current and prior situations, it appears that Sweden is most likely not going to be entering NATO in the near future. And so with that, I hope that addresses the poll, in my opinion, fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and for our last poll, I have to preface it with this. This is purely a question about conflict and nothing related to politics, so please refrain from politics on this one. The question is, Israel was hit from Lebanon with the largest attack since 2006, and do you think it'll lead to war? 40% said yes, it likely will lead to war. 35% said no, it's just usual tensions. 16% said I'm mixed on it, and 10% said unsure. Now, I believe while the stream has been going on, Israel has launched attacks on the places where they believe the rockets were fired from. Pretty widespread attacks with F-35s that apparently they got from America. America. but they have launched these attacks, and they appear to be pretty severe, but maybe not as severe as I thought they were going to be. The fear I had was that that Israel was going to launch such a massive attack against Lebanon or wherever the rockets came from that it would start an all-out war pretty much immediately. But it doesn't look like that's necessarily going to be the case. But Enforcer, what say you?
I don't believe Israel has been to war with any of their neighbors in several decades. I'll have to check that. Let me pull that up, actually. When was the last time Israel was at war? Let's see here. Let's see. We want the actual wars. These are like little incidents. That's what I would largely call them. But the Gaza War, the Lebanon War, began as a military operation in the operation became a wider paramilitary forces. Continuation broke ceasefire, though it formally ended. Lifted naval blockade, resulted in stalemate. So this appears to be revolving around that missile attack you're talking about. Was it from 2006?
Yes.
So it appears that a war was started, and either that missile attack happened during the war, or it happened before the war and what led to the war, on top of the abduction of 2 Israeli soldiers. So it may be leading up to war. The Middle East and the area surrounding this this part of the Middle East is always embroiled in some kind of conflict. Of course, we're not getting into the political side of things, because of course Israel is a very political topic, and the surrounding area in the Middle East is also a very political topic. So we really can't go into it much because we have a rule about no politics. But I do believe on the surface, considering the trends and also the historical information, this missile attack may lead to war. It may lead to the Israelis blockading the Lebanese. It may lead to something like that, but we're not entirely sure at the moment. Airstrikes conducted by the Israelis once these attacks have happened is quite normal. Many of y'all may know that if you'll pay attention to this area. It doesn't necessarily mean that a war will begin, but it is possible that a war could start because this is an incredibly large missile attack. And also there's been some internal situations inside of Israel, of course we can't really touch on a lot, that have been leading to very tense situations in that area. Of course being as generic and vague as possible, but still, with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well. Tell me, Matthew, I have not been looking at the live chat. Has the live chat devolved into chaos?
Nope, I see only one person that violated the rule, and they had to get a timeout.
Oh, unfortunate.
I said it so solemnly.
We started playing the drums. Dun, drum, make ready and fire. I'm like, anyways, I hope we addressed that poll fairly well. I would love to get into topics like that. It's just that and I hope everyone understands this. It's not like a knock against the world, but it is kind of a knock against how things are these days. it is an interesting topic what goes on in the Middle East, but the problem is that it's become so heavily politicized, everything in the Middle East has at this point, that you really can't talk about it without picking a political side in the United States, whether it be one side or another. Of course, we always make sure that we never pick a political side on this channel. We are dead on neutral. All we do is support Ukraine. Everything else, we don't care what you think. As long as you support Ukraine, we're fine by you. That's why we even have Russians in Russia right now watching this stream, like The Russian, which has become famously known in this channel for their username, who does live in Russia. As long as you support Ukraine, I don't care who you are, what your beliefs are, or anything about that, you're welcome on the channel, and, we're not going to, delve into anything else. Like one person who greatly misrepresented our qualm with them. It wasn't that their gaming channel, per se, was going into politics, more so that they went into politics on Twitter massively, and then even told some pro-Ukrainians, I don't care if you are pro-Ukrainian, if you are not in my political belief circle, then I don't care, get lost. And we found that to be incredibly detrimental, because shouldn't you always be welcoming to people who support Ukraine instead of trying to divide them off of what seems to be trivial compared to the strategic situation at hand? I would believe so. That's why we don't ever make dissertations like that. But anyways, would love to get into the stuff, but it's just too volatile to really get into a lot. But with that, we are moving on to the next one. And also, do we have another poll, or are we moving into the questions now?
So that was our last poll for tonight. So with that being said, we're moving into our super chat questions, and the first one we have is from RepoMan46, who puts in a $50 donation and says, have either of you had borscht? And I haven't had borscht, but I have had a pierogi.
I have had a pierogi as well. Pierogies are actually not that bad. They are really good. Even the store-bought ones that are like mass-produced, they're really good. Never had borscht, though. It's really kind of like cabbage soup. And we have had cabbage soup, but we haven't had the specific kind of the borscht variety. So, sadly, no. I hate to say that, though. But still, with that, I think...
Apparently, though, Repo Man must love borscht because he put the little drooling emoji behind it. So, apparently, it's good.
So, let's see. Common soup, often associated with the soups of Ukrainian origin, made with... Oh, wait a minute. It's not a cabbage soup. It's actually made with beetroots. Dude, I swear, back in the day, when I used to watch Bald and Bankrupt before he became a sellout, that this was cabbage soup, because every time you ordered borscht, it always looked like it had cabbages in it and no radishes or beetroots whatsoever. Well, really beetroots, not radishes, but dude, this thing looks like it's meaty, really. I mean, like, there's no meat in this thing, but the color of it is meaty.
Man, it looks like I don't know, like strawberries swimming in like a tomato soup or something with a little bit of sour cream on it.
It looks like the strawberry shortcake stuff that we make to put over the little cakes, if you know what I mean. It kind of looks like that, yeah. But still,
there's a summer borscht. Hey, look, summer borscht look pretty good, actually. Scroll back up.
Summer borscht, this?
It's that purple one. That looks interesting.
Wacky slosh, that ain't bleeding me. But anyways, oh man.
What?
Well, it's purple. You know the memes on the internet. How,
oh, okay.
Yeah,
I got you now.
Wacky slosh. But anyways, getting past that lame joke. I thank you for the support. Sadly, we've never had borscht. One day, maybe we will. We did get pierogies, thanks to y'all. Y'all recommended pierogies to us, and we finally did get some. But we've never had borscht yet. But they look really good. And maybe one day we'll have one, and we'll tell y'all what we think about it. And so with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And once again, adding something else to our menu of foods that we must try eventually. We're always open to looking anywhere and trying anything, and borscht is something that we still have to try. And so with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
Indeed, and thank you very much, Repo Man, for the support. And our next one we have is from Max Power, who puts in a $50 donation and says, I appreciate what you guys do, and thanks. I've been around for a bit and consider myself at least an NCO in the Leaf Spring Army, but could we get an official history of where LSA came from? And also, check your P.O. box, and no, it's not ticking. And that's really good to know.
That's really interesting, though, to have the specific note, it's not ticking. Apparently, it's a digital timer.
Yeah, we gotta look at the wording there really carefully.
Yes, that's like the fine print.
That's a joke, by the way.
But still, thank you for the support, Max Power. And also, this is the only day that we have not checked the P.O. box. We check it daily. I didn't check it today. I'm sorry about that. But we
the
will
documentary later will say they were so lucky not to check the P.O. box that day because it was the day that they could have gotten got.
On this day, an explosion happened.
I'm not doing the Stacy Keach voice well,
Next up on American Greed.
that one. I'm not doing that one well
yeah.
tonight. But anyways, I would consider you. I would consider you a little bit of an NCU in the Lee Spring Army, and also it's great to know that you've been around for quite a while. And I thank you for appreciating what we do. We spend almost all of our free time doing this stuff. It is 60 hours a week for me. Nearly 40 hours a week for Matthew, or 30 or 40 or something like that. I forgot what the actual number is. It's somewhere in that range. But we both work a lot on this channel to make sure that the news that comes out is reliable and as accurate as we could possibly make it. And I got to thank you so much for appreciating what we do and appreciating it enough that you would support us to help this thing to keep on going, because it means a lot to us that people really do enjoy this to that level. And could we get an official history of where the Lee Spring Army came from? Yes, you can, and I'll be more than happy to tell you right here, right now. But before we get to that, I'm just kidding. A lot of people do that in YouTube videos, and they just pad the runtime for like 4 minutes doing that. But the Lee Spring Army started way back in the day, around day 15 to day 20, when I was watching a video of a Panzer S1 burning in a field, and the cameraman walked to the back of the vehicle, and we saw a leaf spring suspension on one of the rear axles. And me, not really being a car person and knowing a lot about cars, the last time I ever saw leaf springs was in a documentary made in the 1930s about how Chevrolet was moving on from using nothing but leaf springs because they were an archaic suspension system. So I assumed that they had been completely phased out by the modern day. I didn't know that that was completely false. So I made the statement, oh my God, that's antique. And everyone was like, you fool! It's not! It's on everything! And so I got flamed for 2 days straight. That honestly sounds like the Clown Motel, Matthew. I'm going to spread out false information. Pump iron for 3 days. But God,
we don't want you around here. You sound a little bit weird.
We don't want you in the Clown Motel. You don't sound sane.
I'm gonna knock you around a little bit.
What?
I'm gonna put some dirt in your eye.
Listen, man, I don't want you on my phone. I'm here with my family.
But anyways, getting past that stupid phone call, which was hilarious, by the way. If y'all have never heard of it, pull up the Clown Motel prank call. It's hilarious. Anyways, moving back to the LSA thing. I got flamed in the live chat for that for 2 days, and Matthew had just been my co-host at that point for nearly 4 days. So it happened almost as soon as he came on. And we decided, this was actually a little bit of the reason why the first schism happened, because the first moderators were really buttholes, and also they were asking for things that would never happen. And they sat there and said, no, don't feed into it. Don't recognize it. And Matthew and me decided it would be funny to just coin that as the community. So we sat there and started joking around about it the third day that the jokes were coming around. And someone in the live chat, we don't know who, they said something like, hey, this is like an army of people who are into Lee Springs or something like that. And so then I said, hey, it's like a Lee Spring Army. And I said, you know what? That's what we're calling our community. From here forward, it's the Lee Spring Army. And that's how the name stuck. The Lee Spring Army has been here long enough to survive the first schism, the Moscow Mike situation, the days of lags around day 116, which was the worst day of lags ever. We've gone through a million things. I mean, hell, the Lee Spring Army.
The day of Matt.
The day of Matt. Well, actually, you came around before the Lee Spring Army, I believe. The day of Matt was before the Lee Spring Army even existed, because you were here when that happened. That created the Lee Spring Army. But, some of the old guards who were around before the Lee Spring Army even existed, they were here for the day of Matt. But the Lee Spring Army has done so much. And what's crazy is that the Lee Spring Army is huge, at least from what we can tell. We were actually told the other day by a viewer that according to the charts, our stream is number 90 out of all of the live streams running on YouTube for the average viewership we get nightly. We are number 90 out of the entirety of YouTube. We're the largest Ukraine war stream there is that runs on a daily basis. In fact, we're the largest one that runs on any basis whatsoever in terms of the live audience viewership. And I think that's amazing.
Call them out.
Call them out. Call them out.
It makes the skin crawl.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely impressive to know that such a grand community has been formed, and it's not just a massive community like we're talking about with the numbers of how big this live stream is. It's done massive things. There's no other community on YouTube that's even gotten close to raising nearly $900,000. And what's crazy is that we're all not even looking at $900,000 as the goal, and we're only about $10,000 away from that at this point. We're still eyeballing $1 million. The Lee Spring Army is not looking at $900,000 being the stopping goal. $1 million is not even a stopping goal. We're just racing on through these checkpoints and these marks, and I think that's crazy and great to know that such a wonderful community, such a strong community has formed around this channel in support of Ukraine. And it's always been the focus of this. It's always been the focus of this community and this channel to support Ukraine. That is why, and that's why I always make this an important note. Our fundraisers take priority. Whatever I have to do to keep people involved in this war and supporting Ukraine, to support those fundraisers, that's what we do. A lot of people on YouTube, I guess they don't really understand that about our channel. Because some people really, and for lack of better words, I feel like some people on YouTube go about this whole thing ass backwards and always act like they should be appeasing the viewers sitting in the comfort of their home instead of trying to appease as many people as possible wherever they may be and how many of them you can to try and make sure that as much support is going to Ukraine as possible through all of the nonprofits that we've raised. That is the major deal on this channel. And that's why we make Sunday fundraisers such a big deal. And that's why they've never stopped. I mean, like, hell, even on Christmas Day, it was a Sunday then, we still made a video for that day to have a Sunday fundraiser. We've never missed one since we've ever started. And I think that is a great thing that we've done. And I think that the amount of support that we've raised has certainly saved hundreds, if not thousands of lives. I know it's most likely saved thousands. And it's thanks to every single one of y'all. And so, not to dote on the LSA, because I dote on the LSA as much as I can. Because y'all don't know how, fortunate we feel to have such an amazing community. There's so many communities out there that are just meh. Not really a lot to them. They're just kind of there. They watch a channel and then they just fade away. But this community just never dies. It's an eternal flame. Like throughout this entire war, the support on this channel for Ukraine has never dropped. Ever. The fundraisers have always raised nearly the same amounts ever since the beginning. Of course, we've had some massive ones, but they've always raised the same amounts. People are always doing everything they can to try and encourage other people to support Ukraine any way possible. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's incredible. And so that wasn't really a history of the LSA right there. That was more of my aside about how great the LSA is. And I'm not kidding. It's great. We actually brought in, hopefully, 3 new members to the Lee Spring Army tonight. We actually had some new neighbors move in. I thought I'd give them a little bit of a shout out. Call them out. And they hopefully will become members of the LSA tonight. Of course, they've subscribed, so that makes you a member of the LSA automatically. But it's really a question for them whether they like this enough to be a permanent member of the LSA. That
sounded kind of ominous. Honestly, it sounded like maybe they're going to become a member of the LSA tonight.
One of us.
Oh,
But anyways, with that, I hope we addressed that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope that gave a fairly good history of the Lee Spring Army Max Power, and also told y'all how proud I still am of this grand community, this never-ending community that will keep on going until the end of the war. The 2 phrases we always use are "Long live the Lee Spring Army" and "The Lee Spring Army never dies." And those phrases have remained true for an entire 407 days and will remain true for another 407 days. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And our next super chat is from JC Atkins, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, JC, for the support. He says, I think that the negotiations over Crimea would be, you have this amount of time to get out, and we will let you go freely. Otherwise, you'll be destroyed in detail. Destroyed in detail. That's a statement I've never heard before, but very, very good.
I've actually heard that before. I believe that is like a 17th, well, no, more like of an 18th and early 19th kind of century statement right there, is that will destroy you in detail. That's actually something I've heard before a couple of times, but it's rare now. Like, you rarely ever hear that now in modern wordage. But I would say that should be the negotiation point. However, one thing I have to say is that I always try and look at the war realistically and look at the diplomatic pressures at play. And the Russians started this entire war over the Sevastopol and Crimea. That's what the whole thing started for. And of course, it moved on to really be about NATO. But that also started because of Crimea. Everything in this war goes back to Crimea and the Black Sea Fleet being in Sevastopol. So that adds a lot of pressure that doesn't exist anywhere else. The Russians could really lose the DPR and LPR without even batting an eye. They wouldn't really care about that. But they would care about losing Crimea because of Sevastopol port. So I definitely agree. I will put no bones about it. The Ukrainians should go all in retaking Crimea. They should try and take it, hell nor high water, unless if a nuclear situation arises. Then a little bit of a negotiation needs to be made. But if we see that there's going to be no progress in that, then just go right back at it, and then we'll see what happens. You know, if Russia wants to play games, the U.S. is always open to play ball, and we have a very good way of playing it. We're the best at playing it in the world. So with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and I'd certainly agree with you. I would think the Ukrainians should go into the negotiations about Crimea like that, and it would benefit the United States and the rest of the Western world if they did something like that. And so with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support, and I definitely agree with you.
All right, and the next super chat we have is from Greg Carmen, who puts in a $20 donation, and sadly, Greg did not leave a comment. But of course, Greg, we appreciate your continuous support and also watching the channel on a very consistent basis. I think he's been here for a very long time. He's been here almost longer than me, I think. But we do appreciate it very much, Greg. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank Greg for the support. Matthew was right. Greg's been around, I believe, longer than he has been. And it's crazy to think that, you know, not only is the Lee Spring Army massive and indomitable, actually in the numbers, we are larger than NAFO, I believe, is on Twitter. I don't know if that's the case.
Sadly we're not.
Because
not even close.
I saw a NAFO Twitter today and it had 95,000 followers, and I was like, wait a minute, I was like, we're bigger than NAFO? I was like, no way, because NAFO was like I thought NAFO was massive. How many followers do they really have?
On Twitter, I think they have like 100,000.
Interesting. Do we know a total count of NAFO members outside of Twitter?
I think that information is top secret.
Dagnabbit. I wish we could have a count of how big NAFO is, because we have a lot of dual, I guess you could say, citizens of NAFO and the LSA that are here on the stream, and I think it's incredible to know that these two communities have worked hand in hand for so long to help out Ukraine. NAFO's done incredible work themselves to get physical things over there, not just support to nonprofits, but their very own vehicles and equipment to the Ukrainian army, which I think is very impressive and something that NAFO should be greatly commended for. I know why they were commended by Zelenskyy, and they deserved it 100%. And so, with that, thank you so much for the support, Greg. I hope that addressed the comment fairly well. And while you didn't leave a comment, of course, we thank you so much for appreciating this channel enough that you would support us and help us to keep this thing rolling. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat is going to go to Rubens, I think Coca Zero, who puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much. And I don't think I've seen them before. I think that might be their first donation supporting the channel, so we do appreciate it very much. And Rubens says, in case of war against NATO, Russia would go to full nuclear war right from the start, and would have nuclear power plants as one of the targets to explode the reactors. After that comes conventional warfare.
I would have to say, I thank you for the support, first off. I would have to say that's most likely not going to be the case, because nuclear weapons are weapons of last resort. And so going to those first and then trying to go to an conventional war is a reverse escalation. It's actually decreasing escalation as the war continues. Because who's to say that Russia wouldn't be turned into a surface of glass by that point, because they would be using nuclear weapons to attack nuclear power plants. And obviously the West isn't going to sit here and cry about it. I mean, like, this isn't the political field where everyone just cries about everything. I mean, things are actually done in this kind of field. If they nuke you, you nuke them. So if they tried that, the Russian army probably wouldn't even exist to go into a conventional war afterwards, so they would immediately be signing their death warrant. They most likely would go into a conventional war first, and as the situation deteriorated, they would start to use tactical nuclear weapons, and then scale up to the ICBMs that would most likely be attacking the United States outright. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and thank you so much once again for supporting the Enforcer channel and helping us to keep this thing running. Of course, I'm not saying you're completely wrong there. That may actually be their plan, you know, but it wouldn't make any sense, because it would be, you know, it wouldn't make any sense on their end to do something like that, because it would practically be reverse escalation. There's no way that their conventional army would survive long enough after they started a nuclear war to conduct a conventional war in Europe. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And also, I was just checking the Twitter, and I saw JD Macco 23 say Doge, and I looked up and I realized the Twitter icon has gone back to the bird, and it's no longer the Doge. So apparently, the pump and dump thing must have happened and gone away.
I repeat, the pump and dump is over. The pump and dump is over. Change the logo. Change the logo. You know.
Oh my goodness. But anyways, on to our next super chat. We have a $20 donation from Boxfish, who says greetings from Hamburg, and I almost said that Boxfish was from the UK, but then he said greetings from Hamburg, so I was like, oh, okay, never mind.
You know, Hamburg is a huge port, by the way. This thing is massive, very extensive. This is their port facilities right here. It's the same size as the city itself.
Yeah, you know, Hamburg is where they invented the hamburger.
Yes, that is correct. That is correct.
Wait, is that actually true?
Yeah, that is correct. The hamburger comes from Hamburg. Where was the hamburger
got it right.
invented? No.
Oh, come on. Hey, Borch, you told me something wrong, man. I thought I was right for a minute.
Hang on. Let's see.
According to White Castle, are we going to take White Castle's word for it?
The people who make the least hamburgery hamburger give a history of the hamburger. But let's see here. In the 1758 edition, as a Hamburg sausage, let's see here. It's supposed it's been eaten by Jewish passengers traveling on the Hamburg America line, which was a German ocean liner company that transported immigrants from Germany to the United States in between the late 19th centuries and the early 20th century. So, let's see. There's reference to the Hamburg steak. It really appears that this thing just naturally came to be. It's called a hamburger. I actually heard that it came from Hamburg, but it appears that it could have really come from wherever, because the first ever instance of something seeming to be a hamburger, like the Hamburg here from 1758, it comes from a book published by Hannah Glass, who was from England. So it's possible that the hamburger may have actually originated from Britain. But I swear I heard the story that it did come from Hamburg, and for the longest time, I thought it was an American dish, but then I was told it actually came from Hamburg, like in the late 1800s, and then it made its way over here and was very popular because a large amount of German immigrants came to the United States and brought the food with them. But, you know, what the hell? That is not a cheeseburger. That's a grilled cheese with a hamburger patty in it. That is, no, that's
like a sandwich bread they're using on that burger.
Yeah, I bet it tastes good, but that's no hamburger. That's not the right kind of buns. You got to have the right buns for a hamburger. What the hell is this?
Man, I have a feeling that's like passed off as gourmet.
The Hamburger Rundstück. Man, that's...
Who put chives on a hamburger?
I don't know, man, but that's what happens once you go to the toilet after eating this thing, is that your run stuck. Oh, man, it looks like someone's runs was already stuck on this plate. From the residue on the bottom. This is not that appealing looking, really, but anyways, let's check out the town of Hamburg, because, you know, Matthew always loves to make references to video games. I think I'll fall into this trend for just a second. I remember in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 flying in on the Blackhawks into Hamburg. But anyways, let's drop down here and take a look at Hamburg. Oh, they've got a cathedral. It looks like it was actually... Yeah, it was destroyed completely in the Second World War, except for the actual clock tower itself.
Need to break out the pressure washer on that thing.
Yikes, man. There's nothing left of Hamburg that's old. This is like one of those German cities I always talked about, Matthew, way back in the day when we were talking about visiting Germany, where I was like, it's like America. Everything's modern. There's nothing older than like the 1950s here, because everything else was destroyed. I mean, look at this place. There is almost nothing left from before 1950.
Yeah, it's crazy. You know, what's wild is the German cities are actually pretty modern, even though they have some pretty historic ones. It seems like the major ones are very modern.
Well, yeah, the major ones are very modern because they got blown away in the 1940s and had to be rebuilt from the ground up. But, I mean, like, none of the...
They'd rebuilt them, like, in the old historic style, though. Like, why'd they have to go, like, super modern and brutalist style?
Well, you know, I mean, there's a little bit of a political thing in Germany, you know, like building in the old style, you know, kind of like a nationalist thing, you know, and they just got done with the nationalist guy who was like, you know, saying "Geschlecht verleugnen," and so they're like, oh, we can't go back to building old.
Someone's gonna clip that.
We can't go back to the old style of building things, so we have to build everything in a modernist style, you know, where it doesn't really have any theme. So
I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, that's kind of why it was rebuilt like that. But yeah, it was largely rebuilt like that. I'm gonna have to do it one more time. I know we might get clipped, but geschleckt by lightning. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one. Thank you so much once again to the support. All the way from the Hamburg garrison of the Lee Spring Army. Incredibly cool to know that we do have German viewers in Germany that watch this channel, and they come from largely, from what we can tell, the northwestern area, because we have a viewer in, I believe, Bremerhaven. We do not have one in Wilhelmshaven. We also have one in Hamburg, and I think we have another viewer from just north of Wilhelmshaven. It's somewhere up here. But still, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope we addressed that one fairly well. And I gotta say, while Hamburg does not have that old German style to it, like some towns, like some small villages like Vilseck have, it certainly is a really cool looking city and a really cool place to live. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right, and up next, we have a $15 super chat from John B. Rempel, longtime channel viewer, and thank you, John, for the support. He says, you gentlemen are doing a fine job, and pass on the question to the live chat, please.
And I thank you so much for enjoying the fine job we do. Now, I always think this, though. I had, like, this shock for a minute. We always just thank everyone for giving us praise, but I don't really take praise too well. It's like something where, like, I'm like, thanks, because I'm always trying to improve things. So my real honest reaction to when people say we're doing great work is, it could be better. But still, I don't want to sit there and dismiss people saying good things about us. So I thank you so much once again for support and having such a high opinion of this channel. We try our best to make this thing as interesting to watch, and we will make sure to grab a live chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And this live chat goes to Noob of the Year, who says, you guys do know that the Ukrainians are being supplied via tunnels in Bakhmut, ?
We don't really know that. We've heard that. We also heard that about Soledar, but we hear that about every city the Ukrainians are fighting, and we heard that about Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, and I'm kind of finding it really tough to believe that every single city the Ukrainians find themselves fighting at has a massive tunnel network under it. Yes, there were mines during Soviet times, and those could be the tunnels they're using, but it still seems very odd that every single city has tunnels under it. So we have heard that a decent amount, but we've never gotten verifiable proof that they exist, and that's how the Ukrainians are being supplied. We've never seen that. Because if that was the case, why not just load the wounded into the tunnels and transport them out? Because that would seem to be the safest and most efficient way to move guys in and out of the city, yet they're still moving vehicles over the T-0504 and into Bakhmut, which is way more dangerous than a tunnel ever would be. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Very good question, though. And I'm not going to say they don't exist. I'm just saying we haven't seen anything to prove that they're there. So, we're kind of a little skeptical about them. But with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support and sponsoring that live chat.
Indeed. And up next, we have a $12 super chat from Margaret Hemsley, who says, get yourself an Easter egg and grab a live chat question.
And thank you so much for the support. Easter is literally just a couple of days away. Tomorrow is Good Friday, and then Sunday will be Easter itself. We will be running streams on both of those days. Of course, we don't miss a Sunday fundraiser. And what better day to Sunday fundraise than on Easter Day? That feels like a day that everyone would be in a very giving mood, especially to help out folks in Ukraine that are currently in a war. So I feel like it would be a great day to run a fundraiser. So we will be running one then. But with that, thank you for the support. We will make sure to get ourselves some Easter eggs. And maybe enjoy them a little. I don't know. I don't really like dipping the Easter eggs in like the colored dye though, because that stuff reeks. I mean, that stuff is nasty.
Oh my goodness.
Like I feel like if those Easter egg dye kits were sent to Ukraine and the Russians used them on the Ukrainians, I feel like the United States would actually militarily intervene, because that's got to be some kind of chemical warfare. I guarantee you. But with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
All right, and our next super chat goes to, guess who? Psyops. He puts in a $10 donation and says, this is more of a notification. I will be missing for a week when the new Zelda game comes out. I don't play many games, but I need to show my nephew what a good game is, so I'm sure you'll understand.
I completely understand. And I thank you for the support and sharing that with us. I hope you enjoy your vacation. Your vacation has been approved. There you go. There's a stamp on your form. You can leave for a week, but you have to be back. because our probation officers will find you and they will force you to come back on. That's just a rule. But still, I completely understand. Video games are one of the few things due to the stream that I can do and really have the time for, rather than just going on rides every once in a while in my car. So I completely understand why you have to do that. You have to show kids what a good game is. Otherwise, they get caught playing Angry Birds. And nothing against Angry Birds, but you know, get into something a little bit more like in depth. You know, there's so many games out there that are in depth, like GTA. Like, teach your kids how to run a. Well, I can't say that, but you know, get your kids into fun stuff. Actually, I'm just kidding. If you have a young kid, do not get them into GTA. Wait until they're like 15 or something, and most likely already a juvenile delinquent, and then get them GTA. Don't get them GTA at like 8 years old, because that's not good for them. But anyways,
you know, really, if you think about it, like, GTA is a fun game. Like, I played it for a while, but really, if you look at the root of GTA, it's like robbing, you know, looting, stealing cars.
Crime.
It's like,
it's literally just crime.
Yeah, it's just crime. But for some reason, we play it and we're like, oh, this is great. But in real life, everybody's like, no crime.
But then again, it's a natural human condition to be, I guess you could say, focused on the macabre. That's why people would gather around for executions back in the day, because people wanted to see something that was a little dark or twisted.
Yeah, I mean, now that you bring it up, I guess it is true.
Yeah, you know, because think about it. Even with people removing the actual blood sports from the world, people still want to watch movies, horror movies where people get gored. You know, people want to watch videos where car accidents happen. People are always people have something innate about them where it's interesting to watch other people suffer in a way, even if it's not even if it's not good. People for some reason want to watch that stuff. Because think about it, though. Really think about it. How many war movies, how many horror movies, and how many kinds of film and media are there out there where people are getting maimed, killed, or wounded? A lot of it. I mean, like, most of it is in that category in one form or another.
True. That's true. I thought you were about to go somewhere else with that.
Oh, no. I'm not. Because think about it again. Once the TV came around, public executions, they start disappearing. You know, blood sports, largely gone for a good while. And as we move on into being able to, I guess you could say, artistically express this kind of macabre nature of people without actually having to get people wounded or killed in real life, the real stuff disappears, but it continues to exist where people's like interest or curiosity about that is satiated. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. Some people are going to be like, wow, that's really dark, but it's a truth. Because I bet you that a lot of y'all go and watch horror movies, you know, because it's thrilling, it's scary, and it's also very dark, you know. And that's why some people are into watching documentaries on YouTube about serial killers. Because it's macabre and it's dark. People are just into that stuff. I don't know why. I'm not really into that, really. Like, I cover the war, yes, but I don't really cover it for a macabre fascination. It's more so for strategic interest and also breaking down things as they happen, and also supporting Ukraine and trying to save lives. But still, maybe a lot of y'all are here for that too. I don't know. But with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for support. Now, I hope we addressed that fairly well.
All right, and our next one also goes to PsyOps. He puts in another $10 donation, and he says, LSA legend Steve Hughes says and asks, have you heard of any Ukrainian air support recently? And have you seen any helicopters or jets drop? No. Let's see. I can't read the second part, but the first part, Steve Hughes says, have you heard of any Ukrainian air support recently? And PsyOps almost got me a second time.
I have not. And Matthew luckily censored it before it was too late. But I have not heard of any massive amounts of Ukrainian air support recently or anything that's been documented. It is happening out there. It's actually somewhat occasional and fairly frequent. It's just that most of the time it isn't filmed. So we don't get any records or instances of it happening. But it is going on out there. We just can't show it. And so with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well from Steve Hughes. And also, thank you for the support at PsyOps and asking that question on his behalf. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And indeed. And while I stutter my way through this. Up next, we have a...
That's all, folks.
Yes. Up next, we have a $10 super chat from CK Bold, who says, take a live chat question. And of course, we can CK Bold, and thank you very much. It seems like CK Bold is putting in that $10 super chat almost every single night these days, asking for a live chat question. And we certainly do appreciate it. And also, I'm sure the folks in the live chat appreciate it too, because we can get to those questions faster. But anyways, sponsored by CK Bold, the live chat question goes to Scott Mincing, who says, if Russia's ambition is access to the Black Sea, wouldn't it have much cheaper to build a bigger port southeast of Crimea?
Not necessarily. That's a great question, actually. Not necessarily. If that was the case, they most likely would have already done that. The thing is, though, is that during the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the Russians and the Ukrainians made an agreement because there's really nowhere for the Black Sea Fleet to go, and it apparently was not economical to do such a thing, that the Ukrainians agreed in a treaty with the Russians to give the Russian Black Sea Fleet port basing rights in Sevastopol. So while Sevastopol city and the Crimean Peninsula would be Ukrainian and part of the Ukrainian state, the Russian Black Sea Fleet would be allowed to base there, maintain their own port facility there, and also operate their navy from this area. So it appears that back in the day when that decision had to be made, the Russians actually decided it would be cheaper to just keep Sevastopol, and probably even now, the war was started because it was far cheaper to take the Ukrainians by surprise and roll the little green men out of Sevastopol to annex Crimea within 24 hours than it would be to spend massive amounts of money to improve a port like Novorossiysk where it could be used by the Black Sea Fleet. And so with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, in kind of a concise way, because there's a lot of hair splitting you can do there and breaking it down to explain it, but really on the surface, it appears that it would be more expensive to do that than it was to annex Crimea. And now they're certainly paying for that decision because it ended up being more expensive in the long run due to the war they've just gotten into a year ago. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. And also, CK Bold, thank you so much for always sponsoring a live chat. And that was a really good live chat as well, a really good question. And I hope that answer was a pretty good one. And of course, if anyone has anything to contradict it, let us know. We always want to make sure that information is correct. But don't be like that guy from earlier where I call Taiwan the Republic of China and then sit there and bash me for getting my information correct. Like, I can't help that I know stuff like Taiwan's called the Republic of China. Like, I can't help that. Maybe if people read more like that guy, maybe they would know. But with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Dive Bomber, who says Turkey's 658 M60A3s, 104 M60A1 Rise variants, and 170 M60Ts would come in handy. The M60A3 is reliable, easy to maintain, and diesel, with outstanding optics and reactive armor, plus a 7.62mm MG and a 12.7mm AA gun. And man, he knows like all the details about all that stuff. He knows all of them.
So, what was said in a nutshell right there, to break that down real quickly, is that the M60A3 uses a Corvette engine. I'm just kidding, it doesn't. It's actually way bigger.
My engine is bigger and more powerful than the Corvette.
But moving on from that, now someone's gonna go, oh, he's with political party A because he made fun of this guy.
No, that's not true. Get your facts straight.
But anyways,
you could send in a drone strike.
Oh man,
that one, I just can't get that one down. Like, that's a tough one.
Oh man, I'm telling you, I get no respect.
I get no respect. I get no respect.
I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. I try and do this voice for people to make them laugh, and then they sit there and go, "Hey, you look like a fish." I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. My eyeballs are bulging out my eye sockets.
But anyways, moving on from that, what the hell were we even addressing? Reread line.
Oh my goodness, I can't reread all that.
Okay, wait a minute.
It was all about Turkey's equipment.
Okay,
yes.
It's the tanks. So what he said is that the M60s have a diesel engine. They use a 105mm gun, which is a gun that almost every Western tank in the world during that time used, and it also has a 50 caliber machine gun. Actually, a couple of them. It has a coaxial with a main gun, and then it also has one usually mounted on the commander's hatch at the top of the turret. It's a fairly good tank, yes. It would definitely pose a great threat to any of the Russian tanks that are on the battlefield right now. So I would say that's pretty good. But I would say it's pretty good to send. But there are better things to send. Like, it's hands down known that the M1 Abrams is better than an M60 because it did end up replacing them. So I would say that it'd be better for them to get Abrams, but then again, it does require a decent amount of upkeep. So in that sense, a M60 would be fairly good just to pump up numbers and make sure that they have competent tanks, at least compared to the Russian counterparts. And so with that, I thank you for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and I'd agree with you. Those Turkish M60s could come in handy for the Ukrainians. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you.
All right, and up next, we have another $10 super chat from Psyops, and this one, I think, is getting into the sketchy territory.
Oh, no.
He says that this question comes from LSA Greg Giles. He says, Russia has a hit list for Ukrainian people, and what have you heard about this? Could you briefly research this? And Psyops is interested as well. That's actually an innocent one.
Let's see. You know, I was getting ready for it to be censored. I didn't pay attention to the actual wordage. I was sitting there listening very carefully to see if you were. Can you reread that one more time, please?
Sure. Saab says, this question comes from the LSA, Greg Giles. Russia has a hit list for Ukrainian people, and what have you heard about this? And could you briefly research it? And Psyops is interested as well.
Russian hit list. Putin has a hit list, according to Russian state media. I know we're on that list. Oh, wait, we found Russian hit list of 47 people. Okay, it's only... Well, that was in 2018. Apparently, it's now probably a lot larger. So we're going to go to the salon. Oh, honey, they have a hit list. So let's get down here and try and find it. Let's see here. How do we win? How should we react? What type of questions are these? And what kind of a thumbnail is this? Awkward babyest moments caught on camera. Remember that one, Matthew, where I was like, she showed a little too much to the crew. Oh, man. But let's see. Let's see.
Oh, no. This site looks bad.
Oh, this site looks bad. I mean, look at these ads down here. You know what? We're getting off of this thing because the salon is nothing but gossip, honey. Let's see here. Of Ukrainians to kill or detain. So this is from Slate. Man, I mean, like, this news is being posted on tabloids. I haven't seen a credible news source uploading this thing yet. But, let's see, according to which was first reported, Moscow plans, United States not detail. Oh my god, there's so many ads on these sites, man. But it doesn't seem that it gives a number of people. It just says that there's a list. So, this guy is literally the Mikado. Wait a minute, I had to clarify that one. The Mikado, which was a play made by Gilbert and Sullivan, way back in the day, where sang a song that he had a little list. The people in the play.
What's the name of the characters, though? The character's name is Nanky Poo.
Oh man, the play. Listen, I'm just saying the play is interesting, but the names aged like milk. Like Poobah and Katisha.
Wait, that's Xi Jinping Poobah.
And Yum Yum. And the Mikado himself. Hey, look, Matthew, it must be the Mikado's team of moderators. Nanky Poo, Pity Sing, Pish Tush. You know, just the usual group of suspects. But anyways, moving on from that. Oh man, you know this is gonna be the next thing. He called me out. He called me the Mikado. He called me the Mikado or whatever. You know, whatever the hell is gonna be next.
Skin's crawling.
Oh my god. You know, I really want him to call me out because I believe if he calls me out, I'm gonna usurp everyone as the #1 YouTuber or whatever. But anyways.
Have you ever watched paint dry? Yeah, it's quite boring.
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. A beautiful day. Anyways, we gotta move on because when you did that voice, man, you sound like Mr. Rogers, honestly. But anyways,
trust me, this man's the total opposite of Mr. Rogers.
Oh.
He's not a good neighbor.
Oh, not that good of a neighbor. But let's see. Let's see.
I get no respect around here. I get no respect.
So I hope we answered that fairly well. Also, one other thing, I always have to make this disclaimer now after the last time. We don't decide not to call out the guy because we're passive aggressive or something and we're trying to make people guess. I'm hoping that a lot of y'all know who we're talking about. The thing is that we don't want to call him out because you see, the YouTube community guideline says that calling someone out like that and sticking your viewers on them is actually a violation of their guidelines and considered harassment and cyberbullying, which a channel can be taken down for pretty quickly. So we don't want to call the guy out because considering what he's done so far and the links he's gone to lie about us, I would have no doubt he would once again try and stick his viewers on us to try and cause us trouble, like having our channel taken down or reported into oblivion. And while he is into that kind of stuff, as long as the guy isn't doing too much, we're going to just not really cover it. So with that, I always have to get this that disclaimer. But with that, I hope we addressed that comment fairly well. I thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you for helping this channel to keep on running.
All right, and with that being said, up next, we have another super chat from Science. He puts in another $10 donation. And of course, thank you very much, Science, for that. He says, LSA Hero, buck naked. And yes, I did know what that said before I read it. I read it anyway. He asks, could you do commentary like Mystery Science Theater 3000 over videos that don't have audio? And could you say, big wet fart, he asks.
Well, Matthew said it, so I'm going to let him just be the only one that said that. But still, I would do commentary like that, but I don't really know what that is or where that comes from. So I'll have to do some research on it and see about circling back and trying to do that. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that addresses that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. Also, another thing, Matthew, I see some people saying they get no respect from us and stuff like that. Another thing I was thinking is it's always interesting to me how much this specific person hates the Lee Spring Army, yet they just coddle up with NAFO, because NAFO and the Lee Spring Army are like almost the same thing, just under different names that have some different ideals, I guess you could say, in smaller forms. So it's like, why the hell are you making a distinction of the LSA versus NAFO? You know, like, that doesn't make any sense. And then completely makes it clear anyone who's in the LSA is not welcome at all. You know, you pretty much have to pick him over the LSA, and that's it. I don't make that distinction. I don't care if we have a beef with someone or not. Y'all can go around and watch whatever channel y'all want. I'm not going to have a problem with that.
It sounds like he really prioritizes Ukraine. Personal feelings
really
never get in the way of raising money for war victims.
Yeah, it really does. When you really think about it like that. And I'm sure all of these will be pulled up as clips. It's just interesting that YouTube doesn't allow us.
I hope he does.
It's just interesting that YouTube hasn't allowed us yet to claim copyright on those clips, considering that he'll show like 5 minutes of our stream sometimes. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one. And someone actually asked, is it just the one channel? Yeah, it's just the one channel. I mean, we don't have a beef with any other channels. I mean, like, hell, a decent amount of the channels that people always think we're having a beef with, we brought them on for the year's anniversary of the war. So, you know, we don't have a beef with anyone but this one channel. Unlike what they say, they're the ones who started it by sitting here and bashing us, and then we riff on them because of that, and then they act like we riff on them for no reason. No, it's because they try and discredit us every day for everything we do. And Keisha Fowler said, you guys are obsessed. No, because I was talking about a play called The Mikado, and then that clicked in my head, and I was like, oh, hey, guess what, guys? But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have another $10 super chat from Psyops, who says, Ender Slayer says and asks, what do you think about Luke Skywalker, aka Mark the Joker Hamill, being the ambassador for United 24's drone fundraiser, and do you think you could interview him?
Does he think I can interview the guy who played Luke Skywalker?
Mark Hamill.
Mark Hamill.
Yes.
Yikes. I mean, that's a tall order. Interviewing Mark Hamill, I mean, like, Mark Hamill's like kind of up there in the world, you know, as far as actors go. So you have to be a little bit up there in the world as like a kind of like a YouTube channel or something to be able to get to him. So possibly give it a try. That would be really interesting if we could, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, you know, it's really hard sometimes to get guests on. Like, we reached out one time to get a message from someone that we were doing something for, and we never got a response back. We haven't got a response back yet. So we could give it a try, but I can't ever make any guarantees on that stuff. But still, that would be incredibly cool. I don't think anyone could disagree. That would be pretty cool. So with that, thank you for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Russ Clinton, who does not leave a comment, but I don't think I've seen Russ in here tonight. We have a lot of new supporters tonight, and we do appreciate it very much, Russ, and thank you very much for the support. Enforcer, what say you?
What if that's Rustin Rot and he just changed his name?
I mean, could be.
Let's see. Maybe it is.
Why?
I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, that would be weird for 2 viewers to be called Rust and Rot. I think it's Rust and Rot with a new name. If it isn't, let us know, though. But still, I thank you so much for the support. And I hope that does address the... Wait, reread it again, because I forgot the message.
So the message was nothing.
Okay, I was just making sure. Had to verify there. I thank you so much once again for the support, helping this channel to keep on running. If it wasn't for folks like y'all, this channel wouldn't be possible. And we thank y'all so much for how much y'all appreciate this channel and that y'all find it worth supporting at all. Because, hell, many people could find this thing not worth supporting, and, we would shrivel up and eventually just cease. But with that, thank you so much once again. I hope we addressed that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Syabs once again, and he says, can you please look up the lake next to Copacabana in South America? How would you pronounce it? Or the Isle of Koa? Muhaha.
Let's see, Copacabana, and this is Copacabana in Rio de Janeiro or Antioquia, Colombia?
South America.
There's 2 of them. There's 2 of them here. Let's find the one with the lake then. So
Copacabana.
So if it's this lake here, I would call this the Lagoa Rodrigo de Freitas. That's how it'd be pronounced, I believe. It's Portuguese. It is in Brazil. The national language of Brazil is Portuguese. So I would assume it would be that. I can't really give you any guarantees, though, because I only took 1 year of Spanish. I never took any Portuguese, but I believe the pronunciation rules are somewhat similar in both of the languages. Correct me if I'm wrong. So now we'll go to Colombia, and we'll see what it's pronounced like there. So we're back to this.
Oh, Copacabana. The way it was spelled, like it looked like Copacabana.
Oh God, we're about to get flamed, Matthew. We're about to get roasted.
I think the side spelled it weird or something. It doesn't look like Copacabana.
Oh no! Look, everyone's already saying it, Matthew. Copacabana. Oh no, we've been burned, and we both said it like that too. Oh man, he says
next to Chile.
It's next to Chile. So let me Copacabana. In Bolivia. Is this near Chile? Come on, map. What happened? This is kind of close to Chile.
Or where am I?
Whoa, you're stacking spaghetti jars in the store, and what happened?
I'll tell you what happened. The top 1% of this country owns half of this country's wealth.
But anyways, I would call it... Oh, no. Oh, man. I gotta read this, don't I? Because there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with the name. You know what? I'm just gonna tell myself there's nothing wrong with the name. It's just a name. It's Titicaca. So we're gonna...
I don't see anything wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Nothing wrong. But I'll tell you one thing. I gotta tell you, Matthew, those people who are into the Putina. I mean, there's some rough people. the Putina.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh,
man. Oh no. Pecan. Oh man, you know what? We must be freaking out the neighbors. They're like, these people are crazy.
Yeah.
But
they're thinking we're nuts.
Yeah, they're thinking we're crazy. But anyways, with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well, Psyops. And thank you for helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Dupper Bob. He says, sadly, he doesn't leave a comment, and Slava Ukraine. And you do know my saying quite well, because that is what I say whenever somebody doesn't leave a comment. Very nice, very nice. And Enforcer, what say you?
And thank you so much for the support, and of course, Slava Ukraine. And thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on rolling. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Dark Warrior 137, who puts in a 5 and says, make a merch of a bobblehead of Matt sitting in a Bobcat skid steer and put an LSA emblem on the side and call it Enforcer Bubble Cap. And I have to say, that's pretty creative right there. That would be pretty cool, but I can only imagine the logistics of actually like having a custom bobblehead made and like trying to ship that. That would probably be a nightmare. But I wouldn't even know where to go to like have a bobblehead made.
That would be cool though, wouldn't it, if we had bobbleheads?
That would be cool.
I wish we could make all kinds of neat merch. We've been wanting to do flags. I think Teespring does flags now, but we still. Oh, dang it! Yeah, I forgot we had to make them in limited batches and actually mail them out by hand if we wanted to do that. But sadly, we never got word back from Booga because I reached out to him to get the flag redesigned, and I sent him a message, and I've never gotten a response back yet. So hopefully, eventually, we can get around to redesigning the flag because a lot of people said it looked like a bit of a Geschlecht for like flag, so we have to change it to make it look a little bit more nice and not like that. Because that was not the intent. It was actually supposed to look like a Prussian battle flag, and it is a Prussian battle flag for the large part. It's designed off of one. For some reason, nobody went with the French battle flag designs we had as examples. Everyone went with the Prussian ones, so that's where the flag design went. But now we have to go and eventually change it. But with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support. And a pretty cool idea for bobbleheads. I'm not going to lie. I would like that.
Yeah, and if anybody in the chat has any free time, that might be a good business to start. Like a more diverse Teespring with like different products that are probably a little bit more complicated to make. That'd probably be very popular with YouTubers. But sadly, we don't have the time. We're starting law school in the fall. Can't manage that and that. But anyways, on to our next super chat. We have a $5 donation from I don't know, who does not leave a comment. So, I don't know, there is nothing here to say, but thank you very much for the support. And Enforcer, what say you?
I don't know.
But I don't know.
I don't know. See, man. But still, thank you for the support. Thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I don't know. I guess that's it. And so, with that, we're on to the next one. I don't know. But thank you once again. Just all jokes aside, thank you so much once again for the support.
All right. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from SJ Caddy, who says, what are the biggest cannons being used in the war? If you like big cannons, check out the Adolf cannons in Harstad, Norway. And I think that was totally innocent, by the way.
The Adolf cannons. And where are they in Norway? What's the name of the town?
Harstad, Norway.
How do you spell that?
Said like a true Alabamian. Harstad, Norway.
Harstad, Norway. Remember that ride at Disney World where you go through like the kind of like fictional history of Norway? I hate that they got rid of that ride. They replaced it with Frozen. That was my favorite ride at Epcot.
Oh yeah, Maelstrom or Maelstrom?
Yeah, Maelstrom. And Spaceship Earth was #1. Maelstrom was #2. It was a great ride. I love that ride. They got rid of it. They stole it from me. They stole it from me, Carmyle. They took it from me. But anyways, we're going to get to the guns. There they are, the Adolf Kanonen. So let's take a look at them. Holy moly, these are some big guns. Wow, they look World War II era. I would take a guess that they are World War II era.
How did they get their name exactly?
Barbara. Barbara!
Well, no, Adolf Cannon. How did they get that name?
Good question. What's the range on these things? Battery Tidal. Battery Teo. They have a range of... Can't really read that well. 61,000 yards. Well, that is some range. I mean, this gun's got range right here. But let's see if we can get... That actually is a 40mm Bofors gun right there. That's actually I believe, a American or a British or a Swedish gun. Hell, everyone used those.
That tire is flat.
Oh, dude, those tires have dry rotted. Call this thing Russian because the tires are not making it beyond the supply yard. I'm telling you that. But anyways, we need to get to what this thing is. Really interesting tour around the facility. We're seeing Barber gun has been well maintained and worth a walk around if permitted. Definitely worth a visit. Very good. What are these things? Come on, like no one's gonna tell us. Let's just go to the visit harstad.com website thing. Maybe it'll tell us about the Adolf Cannon then. Man, I gotta tell you this though, man.
That's taking a good minute to load that.
It's probably the Russians and the phishing scam that they looked at the Adolf Cannon. Let's type that in, the Adolf Cannon. Let's get some information on this thing. It was a German naval gun designed in 1934 by Krupp. Let's see, it was a German naval gun intended for the early H-class battleships, which never were made, I don't think.
Man, Krupp, aren't those people that make those coffee pots?
I think they are.
Oh.
Let me check.
Oh, or the elevators, I think, actually.
I think they make a lot of stuff now. Like, let's scroll down to the present day.
I guess they had to start somewhere.
Let's see, causing a problem. Let's see here.
The Mustang. Wait a minute. The Ford Mustang.
Let's see, Krupp also used the name Mustang for some of their products, causing a problem for Ford when they desired to export their cars with the same name to Germany. Let's see.
I was about to say.
What the hell do they do now? Well, you know,
a little bit of everything.
Back in the day, Krupp was the ones who produced weapons. You can actually see an assortment of their naval guns in the showcase right here, just in case if any interested buyers just wanted a naval gun for no reason. You know, back in the day, man, the world was just a free-for-all. Like, you just walk into a store in Germany in 1905 and buy yourself a couple of top-grade naval guns and just leave, and they'd ship them to you, and no one would care. It's really weird how the world worked back then, but, well, especially compared to now. But apparently this was just a German gun. I don't know if they installed it there during the German occupation of Norway, or whether the Norwegians bought this gun before the war and had it there during that time. Let's see, gun sites in Norway. 7 guns. At the end of the war, were taken over by the Norwegian army. So they were made there. They were built there. The Adolf guns were built by the Germans for coastal defense reasons. So there we go. There's the answer to their history, because I was very interested why they were called the Adolf Kanonen, and that's the reason why. It's because they actually were built on the orders of Adolf Hitler and all that stuff. So let's look at the town. Let's move on from the dark side of history and into the town.
Oh, the grass is greener here.
The grass is greener, for sure. And it doesn't look like a bad town. It's a really beautiful little town, actually. Wow. Nice. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And we did take a look at the Adolf Kanonen. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And wow, that was really north. That thing's north. I mean, this thing is almost in the Arctic. It may be in the Arctic Circle. But with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right, and the next one we have is from BSG Wolf, who puts in a $5 donation. And once again, like he did, I think, a couple weeks back, he's bringing back the nostalgia. He says, have a nitric acid Coke Zero to avoid the diabetes. And for old time's sakes, Wilfred Brimley voice.
Wilfred Brimley? I never did that voice.
Yeah, I don't recall that one.
No, nostalgia, yeah. On the nitric acid Coke, yes. Never did hear Wilfred Brimley voice. Like that one, that's like that Mandela effect stuff, you know, where everyone thought I did a voice called Wilfred Brimley. I've never done that voice in my life. But still, I thank you for the support. We will have a nitric acid Coke. That's one thing that we will have. We love nitric acid Coke. It's delicious, and it opens up the pores. And also opens up your soul to the great beyond, because drinking nitric acid will kill you. But with that, thank you once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right. And yes, I did purposely mispronounce diabetes as a diabetes, because that was a meme at some point, I do believe. But anyway, I see people are flaming me over it already. So, jeez. But anyways, up next, we have a $5 super chat from Amara Fatty, who says, do you own WD-40 and a crescent wrench? If not, I can care package you. And of course we own WD-40. Who doesn't own that stuff? It's like a necessity. The only people that don't own it are the Russians, and they desperately need it.
Any good American has WD-40. WD-40 is the elixir of life. And so that, thank you for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. You do not have to worry about a care package for that. We have plenty of those kinds of wrenches, plenty WD-40. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Craig Platel, who says, I believe the radar video was actually a counter-drone radar system, vice a counter-battery radar.
Interesting. You may be correct. I don't really know a lot about the specific variants and types and uses of these counter radars. So you may be absolutely correct in that. So I'm going to change my statement where it's an anti-drone radar instead. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Slava Something, who puts in a $2 super chat. And they say, heartwarming to see Russians standing up to Putin. And it is quite heartwarming. It's quite good to see people, because that's a very, I I guess you could say the odds are stacked against the Russian people trying to stand up to Putin if they chose to do so. And I'm sure that takes a lot of courage, even for the Russians. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree. It is great to see that there are Russians who are standing up for themselves in the southern regions. It's probably not going to spread to the rest of the country, but it may create another Chechen war. We may see the third Chechen war happening here soon, this time also encompassing the areas of Dagestan and Ingushetia. And so with that, thank you once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $2 super chat from the British Perspective. And that was actually a £2 donation. They said, "You're the man, Enforcer Matt. We love you big time. And I do appreciate the kind words, British Perspective. And I do love Britain myself. I love Britain. It's a wonderful place. Wales is our homeland.
And England is our city."
Yeah, England is our city, as one, well, I can't say that, but one person said at one point.
They'll sue us, Matthew. Don't do it.
Oh, man, I had a good roast, but I'll refrain from that one. But speaking of the British Perspective, we have another $2 super chat from them. And they say, "I want to hear a real long, no respect, please. No, I get no respect."
Oh, man, I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. No respect. I went to the hotel the other day. I said I want a room. They said we don't give rooms to dogs. Oh, man, I'm telling you, it was terrible, real terrible. And the respect doesn't stop there. Oh, no, oh, it gets worse. I walked out onto the street the other day and I hailed down a taxi. He said, "Hey, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to kill me?" I said, "No, I'm just trying to get a ride." He said, "Oh, man, well, if looks get killed, you'd be dropping people dead, not in a good way. Oh, man, I'm telling you. And I never got any respect from my girlfriend either. Oh, man, she's a big one." Heavy said, "Oh, man." And I told her she was ugly. And she said, "Say that again to the back of me." I said I would, but I only have a half tank of gas. Oh, man, life isn't easy for me. Oh, man, I'm telling you. It's rough, real rough. Oh, man, it's bad, bad. Real bad. But anyways,
hey, that was a long Rodney, I gotta say.
That was a long one. He asked for a long Rodney. I had to do a long Rodney. But anyways, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that addresses that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and the last super chat we have is once again from the British Perspective, who puts in another £2 donation and says, "Congrats, guys, and we love you for raising huge funds."
And thank you so much, British Perspective, for the support. And thank you for providing a British perspective on this channel. We try our best, as I always say, to make this as good as possible. And it's great to know that many people appreciate the efforts that the entire Lee Spring Army has undertaken to raise nearly $900,000. We're just about $10,000 short. I'll have to make sure to add up the last fundraiser to the count. But we should be within shooting distance now of $900,000 by this upcoming fundraiser. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope we addressed that fairly well. And with that, we are now on to the live chats. And so, with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and of course, first up, we have the Morse code decoders of the stream. Tonight, it was JP's RCs, Rumpelstiltskin, Cife, Mark Hodges, Cliff Simonson, Dark Warrior 137, and also Paul Scholes. They said the Morse code says, "Armed rebellions in Russia, question mark. Must be those soon-to-be Mobic guys getting frisky. Or feisty."
It was feisty. It was not frisky. It was not frisky. But
well, it could be both.
Man, they got a violent way of getting frisky. They're firing the gun. But anyways, y'all got that correct. And of course, the Morse code message was dead on. It looks like they're getting unhappy down there for sure, and the Russians will be having a very big problem with that, most likely for a good while. And I gotta tell you, oh man, I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one. And thank y'all for deciphering that Morse code message for just about, I think, 360 days at this point. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one from the live chat goes to Ashley Fitzsimmons, who says, "How is Russia going to contain so many new fronts opening up?"
The Russians are most likely only going to have to focus on a single offensive front being opened. The Ukrainians will probably divert all of their effort and attention into a single offensive, as is the way of war. And I believe they'll be able to try and move some of their forces down there to delay that offensive, but there will be no stopping it. The Russians just don't have that ability right now. And we've seen that over the Balaklia offensive and the Kherson offensive, that if the Ukrainians are able to focus their efforts and manpower into a single area, they can overcome and break the Russian army in an open battle. And so with that, I hope that answers that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have another super chat from Psyops who puts in a $10 donation. And Psyops, there is no way in hell that I'm reading that first sentence. Absolutely not. Oh my goodness. But I can read the second one though. He says, "Can we get some love for Archie and Iceman in the chat? Going through a tough time." And yes, we can. We do value both of them being in the live chat and also the stream, and also our best wishes to both of them.
And I also agree. Hope that Archie's doing better. I heard that Archie is doing better, and also it's great to have Iceman back in the chat. Rob has been around for ages, and not only has he been around for ages, he's a very nice guy, and I'm glad to know that he's doing better, and he is here tonight. And also, it's good to know that Archie did get better as well. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Sibes. I hope that addresses that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, big shout out to Miranda Nelson who puts in a $5 donation, and thank you very much, Miranda, and also super sticker this time. The YouTube pair is sweating bullets. It's lifting up 2 dumbbells on an unspecified weight, and it says keep it up. So they're probably 5-pounders, but we'll let that go. But Miranda Nelson, thank you very much for the support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And thank you for the support, Miranda Nelson. And that pair is sweating. That pair is sweating. I don't think that's biologically accurate, but it is sweating nonetheless, and we will keep it up. And so with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you once again.
All right, and back to our live chat questions. We have one from I Am Sheep, who says, does the U.S. supply night vision goggles to Ukraine?
Yes, we do. That's all I can really say. Yes, we do. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Fighting Finn. And like they always say, if you want to win, hire a Finn. How many are in a brigade?
Good question. How many are in a brigade? How many soldiers
straight to Google
are in a brigade? I don't know the honest answer to that. 3,000 to 5,000 soldiers. So if you multiply that number by 9... one second, everyone. Let me go to my calculator, and let me multiply those by 9. So 3,000 times 9. At the minimum, an additional 27,000 soldiers being added to the Ukrainian army with 9 brigades. Or, on the high end, 5,000 times 9... 45,000 soldiers being added to the Ukrainian army. It really just depends on how they've organized and how they structure the brigades as to the manpower. But that would be the low end, 27,000, and the high end, around 45,000. And so with that, we are on to the next one, yeah?
All right, and up next, we have a question from Rangers Rule, who says, China stopping shipping, I believe, is a check to see how the U.S. would respond to their, meaning China's threat, for their next move, and do you agree?
I would say yes in a way, but they know how the U.S. will most likely respond. We're probably already preparing some kind of response, most likely a carrier task group to escort ships through the Taiwan Strait. But we'll have to wait and see in the coming days if that is really one of their one of their aims as well, is to test American resolve over the Taiwan situation, or the Republic of China situation more so. And so with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have another super chat, this time from Dark Warrior 137, who says, I get no respect around here. I get no respect. I opened the door for someone for good manners, but instead she just screamed and flew out the plane. Oh, man, it's terrible. It's terrible.
Oh, man, I'm telling you. I get no respect around here. No respect, I tell you. Oh, man, it's terrible. I opened the door for someone for good manners, but instead she just screamed and flew out the plane. Oh, man, it's terrible. It's terrible. I'm telling you, I can't handle it anymore.
But
oh, gosh, put the shotgun down.
I had to do it, Matthew. That one is just too tempting. But thank you for the support, Dark Warrior 137. And I get no respect around here, man. I sat there and added in a sound. I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. I try to add in a sound effect to my jokes. I was told, hey, put the shotgun down. It's not worth it. Oh, man, I'm telling you. So I'm just going to clip that for sure. But still, with that, I hope you got a double dose of Rodney there. Thank you once again for the support. I hope that addresses that fairly well. And we are on to the next one. You know, Matthew, I think over the course of a short month, we weeded out all the people who do not like Rodney, and the only people left are the people who like Rodney.
Yep.
Yeah.
It ended up working out for the good.
Yeah, it ended up weeding out the Rodney haters. Now all the Rodney haters You know, oh man, I'm telling you, they get no respect around here. No respect. I'm telling you. They're out there on the street begging for cash. They're going, hey, can someone pick me up and put me in the community? Oh man, I'm telling you, it's terrible. Terrible, I tell you. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have another super chat, this time from Matherm100, who puts in a very generous $20 donation. And thank you very much for that. And they say, you are amazing. The YouTube para is jumping around, confetti's running rampant, and it's beating itself in the head with a Olympic ring, I think.
It looks like
beating itself in the head.
Yeah, it looks like it's having a schizophrenic meltdown. Honestly, that thing may be saying we're amazing, but someone needs to get that thing on antidepressant stat because it's got some problems. But still, thank you so much for the support, Matt Turn, and sending us a super sticker I've never actually seen before. I've never seen that one. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. We're moving on to the next one, but before we do, Andy Pro said so annoying. So yes, there are people who still do not like Rodney around. Hate to see it. You know, I can't really rat on it though, because some people like voice impressions, some people don't. I mean, it is the question segment. We've actually, if y'all noticed, cut out the voices and a lot of the joking in the news segment. Maybe y'all enjoy that a little bit better, but you know, we still have the same amount of jokes that we normally have in the question segment because, you know, there's got to be a light mood. No, it's got to be light during the news. It's got to be light during the question segment. It is a war after all. It's really tough to mentally handle this kind of stress and I guess you could say, stress and strain for so long. And I want to make sure that folks are actually able to handle getting the news each day without having a mental breakdown like some people out there would rather have them have. But anyways, with that, thank you so much once again. Hope that does address that fairly well. And you are amazing, Matherm, for helping us to keep this channel running and enjoying our channel enough that you would actually support it. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And I'm absolutely getting walloped in this poll right now. Who does the better Rodney? It looks like, oh man, I get no respect. I get no respect. I only have 33% that said I do a better Rodney, and 68% said the enforcer. 69% said the enforcer.
Oh,
nice.
Oh man, I'm telling you, it was real nice, I'm telling you. Oh man. Oh,
I gotta pull up a spreadsheet of this guy's jokes because I'm forgetting them as I keep going. All I know is to go, oh man, like a million times. But Christian Chris says, I hate Dangerfield. Him and when the enforcer does them. I'm sorry. I don't mean to get any of y'all angry. I'm just trying to let y'all have a little laugh. And I thought some of y'all liked Rodney, you know? And then Panelli said cancel culture. I mean, like, it's not cancel culture exactly. It's just that some people don't like it much. And I get it. You know, some people don't like voices. A lot of people do like voices. So it's kind of like a mix, you know. I guess some people, I guess it's
some people do like voices, but I have to say, Enforcer, we're running quite late and we have a few super chats to get to.
You're right. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next, big shout out to Antidote, who puts in a $1 donation, but without a comment, and we do appreciate it very much. We also have a $10 super chat from Mace, who says, I still like the Winston Churchill impression the best.
I have to tell you that in the history of this channel, I have only done the Winston Churchill impression about twice. And that is what we're going to try and do.
But with that, thank you for the support. I hope that was an okay one. I don't do Churchill well, in my opinion. But if you like it, hey, I thank you for enjoying it. I try my best. And so with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And this one goes to Dan Neish, who puts in a $20 donation and says, N.A. Zdorova from Philly.
Nazrova from Philly. And thank you so much for the support all the way from the big city of Philly. Philadelphia. What a big city.
Oh man, this thing's big.
Dude, Philadelphia is actually massive. Like on both sides of the river, spanning forever. I mean, it's really not even a city. It's just like a stretch of massive towns going all the way from Wilmington up to New York. Or really more to Trenton. But anyways, thank you so much once again for the support. All the way from Philadelphia and helping this channel to keep on running. You've been around for a pretty good while and have helped this channel a decent bit. And I got to thank you so much. Because I remember back in the day, you actually had us look at the Please Touch Museum when we went to Philadelphia. And we laughed at all the things you could touch in that museum. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right. And Enforcer, go through the spill because this is probably the last one of the night.
Oh, Man, I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. No respect. I try and run a 3.5-hour show, and my co-host tries to cut it off. Oh, man, I'm telling you.
But he's got a good point. It is getting very late. We are running over time. And so with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
All right, and that viewer is Ted B, who says, do you think, or Enforcer, that, wait a minute, hold on, this wording's tripping me up a little bit. Do you or the Enforcer think that invading Taiwan was already planned but postponed because Russia is failing so badly? And for me, I'll say that I believe, yes, it was postponed. China has had their eye on it. They might have been waiting to see what Russia was going to do with Ukraine, and it kind of scared them for a minute, but I don't think that'll deter them from trying to take Taiwan in the future. They'll just simply learn from the mistakes and try to avoid them while they carry out the invasion anyway at some point. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say they probably didn't have an invasion of Taiwan planned because there's really no way for them to feasibly pull it off. Matthew and me actually disagree a good amount, I think, on Taiwan. But hey, there's no such thing as a right or wrong answer because none of this stuff has ever happened. So I really don't think there was an invasion plan for Taiwan because there's just no feasible way right now the Chinese could pull it off successfully, in my opinion. Their military may be big, yes, but invading an island like this that has the geographical challenges that it will have with a military that would be about just a few thousand strong with a couple of armored vehicles supporting him, there really is no way for that to succeed, and also for it to be supplied regularly without a lot of those ships being destroyed. So in my opinion, I would have to say most likely not. And seeing the war in Ukraine furthered the idea that while countries may be small and a country can dwarf them in economic power, size, and everything else, that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll win. So I guess everything I'm trying to say throughout all of this is that size does not matter. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well. While Matthew goes over, while Matthew does that on his end. But with that, it is the end of the night stream. I thank you all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure covering the news tonight and, of course, going through the question segment with all of y'all. If y'all all enjoyed as much as we enjoyed having y'all around and covering the news with y'all, please make sure to hit the like button and subscribe because we run this stream every single day of the week. 24 hours a day. Well, not 24 hours a day. Whoops. What the hell? We're not Fox or CNN. Get out of here.
In our minds, it feels like 24 hours a day.
Yeah, it feels like 24 hours a day in our heads. But we run this stream every single night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, covering the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine in picture and video evidence. Every day of the week except for Monday. We take that day off. So with that, I will be seeing you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the war in Ukraine. Good night. Good luck. Take care, stay safe, and of course, Slava Ukraini.
And Slava Ukraine, Heroes Slava, and sorry, but Putin is no longer being done. It's expired. Thank you.
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці, запануємо ми, браття, у своїй сторонці. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу. що ми, браття козацького